For over 2,000 years, Buddhist teachings have helped people find peace, not by fighting against their thoughts, but by understanding them. Tonight, we will go on a journey to learn how Zen Buddhism can calm the anxious mind. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. We live in a world that moves very fast. The mind tries to keep up. It believes that if it just thinks hard enough, worries thoroughly enough, it can keep us safe. And so it never stops. But somewhere beneath all the noise and anxious thoughts, there is a quieter way of being. Zen Buddhism points to this stillness, not as something we must create, but as something that is already here, waiting to be remembered. Tonight, we will sit with ancient stories and teachings that have guided countless people towards this peace. You do not need to do anything special as you listen. You do not need to fix yourself or quiet your mind through force. Simply let these teachings settle into you like rain soaking into soft earth. Let your body rest. The calm you are looking for is closer than you think. It has been here all along. Relax, and let's begin our journey together. There's movement in your mind right now. Even as you listen, thoughts come and go without your permission. This is simply what minds do, and Zen Buddhism has been studying this phenomenon for over 1,000 years. The ancient teachers called it monkey mind. Picture a monkey swinging through trees, grasping one branch only to immediately reach for the next, never settling, always in motion. This isn't meant as criticism. It's simply an honest observation of how the untrained mind behaves. The Buddha himself spoke of this. He described the mind as wild, difficult to guard, difficult to control. But he also taught that this wildness could be understood, and in understanding it, we find freedom. The trouble comes when we believe we are the monkey, when we identify so completely with every anxious thought that we forget there's something else here too, something watching, something that notices the movement without being swept away by it. Anxiety feels deeply personal. It seems like your particular burden, evidence of something uniquely wrong with you. But Buddhism teaches something different. It suggests that anxiety is less personal than it appears. It's what happens when any human mind gets caught in certain patterns of thinking and reacting. This is where Zen begins. Not with fixing or solving, but with looking. With the simple, radical act of paying attention to how your own mind actually works. There's an old Zen story that has been passed down through generations of teachers and students, and it begins on a misty morning by a river. A man was rowing his small boat across the water at dawn. The air was cool and soft, visibility was poor, but he knew this crossing well. He'd made it hundreds of times. The gentle rhythm of the oars was almost meditative, and his mind was quiet for once. Then, through the fog, he saw another boat approaching. It was heading directly toward him on a collision course. He called out a warning, but the boat kept coming. He waved his arms and shouted louder. Still it approached. He tried to row out of its path, but there wasn't time. The other vessel struck his boat with a solid thud, nearly throwing him into the cold water. The man was instantly furious. His peaceful morning had been shattered. His heart pounded against his ribs. Heat rose to his face. He gripped the side of the other boat, ready to unleash his anger on whoever had been so careless, so reckless, so utterly thoughtless. But when he looked into the boat, it was empty. Just an old vessel that had slipped its moorings somewhere upstream. No captain at the helm. No one to blame. Just weathered wood and river water, drifting wherever the current pushed it. The man stood there, hands still gripping the empty boat, and felt something strange happening inside him. His anger, which had felt so justified and so necessary just moments before, had nowhere to land. There was no target for it. No story of disrespect or carelessness or malice. And without a target, the anger simply began to dissolve. Like morning fog burning off as the sun rises. He sat back down. He watched the empty boat drift away into the mist. He picked up his oars and continued his crossing. But something had shifted in his understanding. That evening, he found himself in a dispute with a merchant at the village market. The merchant had overcharged him, or so he believed, and he felt the familiar heat building in his chest. The righteous words were forming, the accusations, the certainty that he was right and this other person was wrong. Then he remembered the empty boat. He paused and looked at the merchant more carefully. This was a man with tired eyes and worried lines around his mouth. A man with his own pressures and fears and sleepless nights. A man being pushed by currents the customer couldn't see. What if this person was also an empty boat? What if the overcharge was a mistake born of exhaustion, or a calculation born of desperation to feed a family, or simply a different understanding of fair value? What if none of it was aimed at him personally at all? The anger was still there. He still believed he'd been overcharged. But the story around the anger had changed completely. And with that change, he found he could speak calmly. He could negotiate. He could even walk away without feeling wounded. The transaction remained a transaction, not a referendum on his worth or the world's fairness. For years afterward, whenever the man felt anger or anxiety rising, he would ask himself a simple question: is this an empty boat? Usually it was. Buddhism teaches that so much of our suffering comes not from what happens, but from the stories we construct around what happens. The boat hitting us is just an event. Wood meeting wood. But our minds immediately want to know why, and who is responsible, and what this means, and whether it will happen again. We build elaborate narratives of blame and fear, and then we suffer from those narratives far more than we ever suffered from the original event. Anxiety works exactly this way. Something happens, some small uncertainty or discomfort, and the mind begins constructing stories. What if this means something terrible? What if I can't handle it? What if everything falls apart? The initial discomfort was real. That was the boat bumping into you. But the catastrophic tales that follow are stories, and Zen teaches that stories can be recognized as stories. They can be held more lightly. The practice isn't to stop having thoughts. That's impossible. The practice is to see thoughts as thoughts. To notice when you're building a story around an empty boat. And in that noticing, to find a little more space, a little more freedom, a little more choice in how you respond. But what happens when the thoughts won't stop? When anxiety isn't a passing visitor, but a constant presence, chattering in your ear from the moment you wake until you finally fall into restless sleep. A student once traveled many weeks to meet a Zen master who was known throughout the region for his extraordinary calm. This teacher had lived through wars. He had lost his monastery to fire, rebuilt it, and lost it again. He had buried students and friends. And yet everyone who met him spoke of a stillness that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a hearth in winter. The student arrived exhausted from his journey and agitated in his mind. He had spent the entire trip worrying about whether he would find the master, worrying about whether the master would see him, worrying about his family back home, his uncertain future, the state of the world, the state of his own heart. His mind had not been quiet for a single hour of the entire journey. He found the master sitting in a small garden behind a simple wooden building. The old man was watching a beetle make its way across a stone. Just watching, with what seemed like complete attention, as if this beetle's journey was the most interesting thing in the world. The student bowed and waited to be acknowledged. When the master finally looked up, his eyes were kind but penetrating. He gestured for the student to sit. "Teacher," the student began, the words tumbling out, "I've come to ask how to stop my anxious thoughts. They never leave me alone. I've tried forcing them away, and they only grow louder. I've tried ignoring them, and they wait until I'm still again. I've tried reasoning with them, arguing against them, proving them wrong with logic and evidence, but they always have a response. They're relentless. Please, tell me the secret to making them stop." The master listened without interrupting. When the student finished, there was a long silence. The beetle continued its journey. A bird called somewhere in the trees. Finally, the master spoke. "Bring me one of these anxious thoughts." The student hesitated. "I'm sorry? You say thoughts torment you. You speak of them as if they are enemies with swords surrounding you on all sides. Bring me one. Let me see it." "I can't bring you a thought," the student said, confused. "Thoughts aren't objects. They don't have form. They're just in my mind." "Ah," said the master. "So they have no form. They cannot be touched or held or weighed. Tell me, where do they come from?" The student considered this. It was not a question he had ever asked himself. "They just arise," he said slowly. "One moment my mind is relatively quiet, and then suddenly a worried thought is there. I don't choose to think it. It simply appears. And where do they go? When one thought ends and another begins, where does the first one go?" This question was even stranger. "I don't know. It fades, I suppose. It dissolves." The master nodded, as if this was exactly the answer he expected. "So these terrible thoughts that you have traveled weeks to escape have no physical form. They arise on their own, without your decision or consent. They dissolve on their own, also without your decision or consent. They come from nothing and return to nothing." He paused and picked up a fallen leaf from beside him. "What you describe sounds less like enemies with swords and more like leaves falling from a tree. The tree does not choose when each leaf will drop. The wind carries them where it will. Some land nearby, some blow far away, and then they decompose and become part of the soil again." "But they feel so real," the student protested. "When I'm caught in them, they feel like the most important thing in the world. They feel like truth." "Of course they do," the master said gently. "That is the nature of thoughts. They are very convincing. This is what gives them their power. A thought appears and announces itself as truth, as emergency, as something that must be addressed immediately. And because we believe this announcement, we give it our attention, our energy, our belief. We climb onto the thought like climbing onto a wild horse, and then we are surprised when it carries us somewhere we did not want to go. So how do I stay off the horse? The master smiled. First, you must see that it is a horse. Most people don't even know they've mounted. They are so identified with their thoughts that they don't realize there is any separation possible. The thought arises, and they become it completely. They are the anger. They are the fear. They are the worry. But there is separation possible? You are experiencing it right now, the master said. We have been sitting here talking for some time. During our conversation, how many anxious thoughts have passed through your mind? The student reflected honestly. There had been many. Worries about his family. Doubts about whether this teaching would help. Concerns about his long journey home. They had come and gone like weather. Many, he admitted. And yet you are still here. You were not carried away by any of them. You noticed them, perhaps, but you did not become them. You did not stand up and run home to check on your family. You did not storm away in doubt. The thoughts arose, and you let them pass, and you remained in this garden with this beetle and this old man. The student realized this was true. The thoughts had been there, but they had not consumed him. They had been more like sounds in the distance than commands he had to obey. The practice is not to stop thinking, the master continued. That is like trying to stop the wind. The practice is to stop believing that every thought requires your complete attention and identification. You are not your thoughts. You are that which is aware of thoughts. Do you understand the difference? I think so, the student said. But how do I remember this when the thoughts are very loud? You forget. And then you remember. And then you forget again. And then you remember again. This is the practice. It is not a destination you arrive at once and then stay forever. It is a returning, over and over, countless times. Every time you notice that you have been lost in thought and you come back to the present moment, that is the practice. That is enlightenment in that moment. Not some special state, but simply waking up from the dream of thought. The student stayed with the master for 3 more days. They did not have many conversations. Mostly the student watched the old man go about his simple tasks, sweeping the garden, preparing tea, sitting in stillness as the morning light changed to afternoon and the afternoon faded into evening. And in that watching, the student began to understand. The master was not someone who never had thoughts. He was simply someone who had learned to let thoughts come and go without mounting every one like a wild horse. His peace was not the absence of a mind, but a different relationship to the mind he had. On the morning the student left, the master gave him a small gift, a smooth stone from the garden. When you find yourself caught in thoughts, the master said, hold this stone. Feel its weight, its temperature, its texture. Let it remind you that you are here, in this moment, in this body. The thoughts are just weather. You are the sky. There is another story, less famous but equally instructive, about a woman who came to practice at a small temple in the mountains. She was a potter by trade, and her hands knew the feel of clay better than they knew anything else. But her mind was another matter. It spun constantly with worries. Would her kiln fire properly? Would her pots sell at market? Was her daughter making good choices? Was her aging mother being cared for well enough? The questions never stopped, and they had worn grooves in her thinking like water wearing grooves in stone. The teacher at this temple was a woman herself, unusual for that time and place. She had a reputation for unconventional methods and for seeing directly into the hearts of her students. When the potter explained her troubles, the teacher simply nodded and said, "Good. You will work in the kitchen." The potter was confused. She had come for meditation, instruction, for wisdom, for some technique to quiet her racing mind. Instead, she was given vegetables to chop. For 3 days, she chopped vegetables. Carrots, onions, radishes, greens. Her hands, so skilled with clay, felt clumsy with the knife. And all the while, her mind continued its worried spinning. She thought about her business back home. She thought about whether this was a waste of time. She thought about what the teacher must think of her. She thought about thinking too much. On the 4th day, the teacher came into the kitchen and watched her work for a while. Then she asked a simple question. "When you are forming a pot on your wheel, what are you thinking about?" The potter paused, knife in mid-air. She considered the question honestly. "Nothing," she said finally. "When I am at the wheel, I am just at the wheel. My hands know what to do. I am not thinking about the pot. I am making the pot. And your worries? Where are they when you are at the wheel?" The potter realized something she had never noticed before. They're not there. When I am truly working the clay, there is no room for them. There is only the clay and my hands and the shape that is forming. The teacher smiled. "So you already know how to be free from the spinning mind. You have known for years. You simply didn't recognize it." She gestured at the vegetables, the knife, the cutting board. "This is the same. When you chop, just chop. When you breathe, just breathe. When you walk, just walk." The worried mind requires you to be somewhere else, thinking about something else. It cannot survive your full presence here and now. The potter understood, but she had a practical concern. "I cannot spend my whole life at the potter's wheel or in a temple kitchen. I have to live in the world where there are real problems that need thinking about." "Of course," said the teacher. "The practice is not to never think. Thinking is useful. Planning is necessary. The practice is to know the difference between thinking that serves you and thinking that spins without purpose. When you are at your wheel, you think about the pot. When you are selling at market, you think about prices and customers. This is natural thinking, thinking that belongs to the moment. But when you are at your wheel thinking about the market, or at the market thinking about your mother, or with your mother thinking about your kiln, then you are nowhere at all. You are lost in the spinning." She picked up a carrot and handed it to the potter. "Start here. 1 vegetable, 1 cut, 1 breath. Not as a way to escape your life, but as a way to return to it. The spinning mind takes you away from your life. Presence brings you home." The potter stayed at the temple for 2 more weeks. She did not receive elaborate teachings or secret techniques. She chopped vegetables. She swept floors. She sat in silence with the other students. And slowly, gradually, she began to notice something. The spinning mind still spun, but it spun less. And when it did spin, she recognized it more quickly. Oh, she would think, "There I go again." And that recognition, that simple seeing, was enough to bring her back. When she returned to her village and her pottery wheel, she brought this practice with her. She noticed when she was present and when she was lost in thought. She noticed when her thinking was useful and when it was just spinning. She didn't become a different person. She became more fully herself, more available to her own life, less lost in the maze of her own worrying. This is what the Zen tradition calls mindfulness, though the word has become so overused that it has almost lost its meaning. It simply means paying attention, noticing what is actually happening, right here, right now, rather than being lost in stories about the past or fantasies about the future. The Buddha taught this as the foundation of the entire path. He called it right mindfulness, and he described it in beautifully simple terms. When walking, know that you are walking. When standing, know that you are standing. When sitting, know that you are sitting. When lying down, know that you are lying down. This sounds almost too simple to be useful, and yet most of us spend most of our lives doing the opposite. We walk while thinking about work. We eat while planning tomorrow. We lie in bed while rehashing yesterday. We are almost never simply where we are, doing what we are doing. Anxiety flourishes in this gap. It lives in the space between where you are and where your mind has wandered off to. It grows stronger every time you abandon the present moment for some imagined future or remembered past. But when you are fully here, fully present, anxiety has nowhere to take root. Not because you've solved all your problems or eliminated all uncertainty, but because you've stepped out of the mental storytelling that amplifies fear into something overwhelming. This is where we begin the journey of calming the anxious mind. Not with techniques for conquering fear, but with something gentler and more fundamental. With seeing. The Buddha taught that right understanding is the foundation of the path. Before we can walk toward peace, we must see clearly where we are and how we got here. This means looking honestly at how the mind creates its own suffering. Your restless mind is not your enemy. It evolved over millions of years to keep you alive, to scan for threats, to anticipate problems, to imagine future dangers so you could prepare for them. This was useful when threats were immediate and physical, when a moment's inattention could mean death. But now the threats have changed. They are abstract, complex, often imaginary. Financial worries, social fears, existential anxieties about meaning and mortality. The mind, still running its ancient software, treats all of these as emergencies. It sounds the alarm constantly, not because you are in danger, but because that is what it evolved to do. Zen practice does not ask you to silence this mind. That would be like asking a bird not to fly or water not to flow. Instead, it invites you to understand the mind, to see its patterns clearly, and to discover that you are not identical to those patterns. The thoughts will continue. The monkey will keep swinging. But you can learn to watch without being caught. You can learn to listen without obeying. You can learn, as that old master taught, that you are the sky and thoughts are just weather passing through. There is a traditional saying in Zen, "Before awakening, I chopped wood and carried water. After awakening, I chop wood and carry water." The activities don't change. Life doesn't become something other than what it is. But the relationship shifts. You are no longer lost in the dream of thought. You are present for your own life. This is what we are cultivating here. Not a special state of permanent bliss. Not freedom from ever having another anxious thought. Simply a clearer seeing, a lighter holding, a recognition that thoughts are thoughts and you are you. And in that recognition, there is peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of understanding. This is enough for now. We have taken the first step together. We've looked at the restless mind with curiosity instead of judgment. We've met the empty boat and seen how our stories multiply our suffering. We've learned from the old master that thoughts are not commands, that they arise and pass like leaves on the wind, and that we can watch them without becoming them. In what follows, we will go deeper. We will explore the art of stillness and the gentle practice of letting go. We will discover how the present moment can become a refuge from anxiety's grip. We will learn what the Buddha meant when he taught that impermanence is not something to fear, but something that sets us free. But for now, rest with what is. Artifact 2. The art of stillness. We live in a world that never stops moving. From the moment you wake up, there are things demanding your attention. Phones buzzing, emails waiting, people needing things from you. The noise doesn't stop, and somewhere along the way, you forgot what silence feels like. Zen offers something simple in response to all this chaos. It offers stillness, not as an escape from life, but as a way to meet life more fully. The practice of sitting meditation, called Zazen in Japanese, has been at the heart of Zen for over 1,000 years. But it's often misunderstood. People think meditation is about achieving something, about reaching a special state where thoughts stop and bliss begins, about becoming someone calmer, better, more spiritual. But that's not what Zazen is. Zazen is just sitting, nothing to achieve, nowhere to get to, no special state to reach. You sit down, you breathe, you notice what's happening. That's it. This might sound disappointing if you came looking for magic. But there's something deeply freeing about a practice that asks nothing of you except your presence. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to quiet your mind or control your thoughts. You just have to show up and sit. The Buddha himself found awakening while sitting under a tree, not performing elaborate rituals, not studying ancient texts, just sitting, watching, being present with things as they are. There's a reason stillness has been valued by every wisdom tradition in human history. When you stop moving, something has a chance to settle. Like muddy water that becomes clear when you stop stirring it, the mind naturally calms when you give it space. There's an old story from Japan about a tea master named Takeno. He was famous throughout the land for the beauty and precision of his tea ceremony. Lords and warriors traveled great distances just to experience tea prepared by his hands. In his small tea room, time seemed to slow down. The troubles of the world faded away. There was only the steam rising from the cup, the quiet movements, the deep peace that filled the space. But Takeno was not a warrior. He had never held a sword in his life. He knew nothing of combat or fighting. He was simply a man who had devoted his life to the way of tea. One day, while traveling to serve tea at a lord's estate, Takeno accidentally bumped into a young samurai on the street. It was a small thing, barely a touch of shoulders as they passed. But the samurai was in a foul mood, and he took offense. "You have insulted me," the samurai declared loudly, so everyone nearby could hear. "I demand satisfaction. We will duel at dawn tomorrow by the river." Takeno was terrified. He had no training with a sword. He had never been in a fight in his entire life. A duel with an experienced samurai meant certain death. He spent the rest of the day in a panic, his mind spinning through possibilities. Could he run away? Could he hide? Could he find someone to fight in his place? None of these options were possible without bringing shame on himself and his family. Finally, in desperation, he went to visit a sword master who lived in the city. Perhaps this teacher could give him a few quick lessons, some basic technique that might help him survive. The swordmaster listened to Takeno's story and shook his head sadly. There is nothing I can teach you in one night that will save you from an experienced swordsman. If you face him blade to blade, you will die. Takeno felt his heart sink. Then there is no hope? The swordmaster was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked an unexpected question. Tell me about your tea ceremony. What is it like when you prepare tea? Takeno was confused by the question, but he answered honestly. When I prepare tea, everything else falls away. There is no past or future. There is only the water, the cup, the movements I have practiced 10,000 times. I am not thinking about anything. I am simply there, completely present, doing what I am doing. And are you afraid when you make tea? Afraid? No. There is no fear. There is no self to be afraid. There is only the ceremony. The sword master nodded slowly. Then this is my advice. Tomorrow, when you face the samurai, do not try to fight him. You will lose. Instead, prepare to serve tea. Face your death the same way you prepare your ceremony, with complete presence, with no thought of past or future, with no self to protect or defend. Takeno didn't fully understand, but he had no other options. That night, he sat in stillness, preparing himself not to fight, but to die with the same grace with which he had lived. The next morning, he walked to the river where the samurai waited. A small crowd had gathered to watch. The samurai drew his sword and took his fighting stance, ready to strike. Takeno removed his outer robe calmly, folding it with the same care he would use in his tea room. He placed it neatly on the ground. Then he straightened his remaining clothes, smoothing them slowly, deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world. He looked at the samurai. There was no fear in his eyes, no anger, no desperation, just the same quiet presence he brought to every tea ceremony. He was not thinking about winning or losing, living or dying. He was simply there, in that moment, completely. He reached for his sword, which he barely knew how to hold, and began to raise it over his head. His movements were slow and deliberate, like pouring water into a cup. The samurai hesitated. Something was wrong. This was not how an opponent was supposed to behave. Where was the fear? Where was the desperation? This tea master moved like a man who had already accepted death, who had nothing to lose, who was completely at peace with whatever happened next. The samurai had seen many men face death. They always showed fear. They always made mistakes. But this man showed nothing except calm presence. It was unnerving. It suggested a skill, a depth, that the samurai couldn't see or understand. Doubt crept into the samurai's mind. Was this tea master hiding some secret technique? Was his stillness a trap? Long moments passed. Neither man moved. The crowd held its breath. Finally, the samurai lowered his sword. "I withdraw my challenge," he said quietly. "There is nothing to be gained here." He turned and walked away. Takeno stood by the river for a long time, still and quiet, feeling the morning sun on his face. This story points to something important about stillness. It's not weakness. It's not passivity. It's not giving up or checking out from life. True stillness is a kind of power. When you are fully present, fully grounded in this moment, you become very hard to push around. The samurai was skilled at fighting fearful opponents. He knew how to exploit their panic, their mistakes, their scattered attention. But he had no idea how to fight someone who wasn't afraid, someone who was simply present. Anxiety scatters us. It pulls our attention in a dozen directions. It makes us weak by making us fragmented. But presence gathers us back together. It gives us access to our full strength, our full clarity, our full capacity to respond. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki, who brought Zen to America in the 1960 seconds, used to say, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." This points to the same truth. When we approach life with stillness and openness, without our fixed ideas about how things should go, we become more flexible, more adaptable, more alive. Takeno survived not because he learned to fight, but because he learned something more fundamental. He learned that the presence he cultivated in his tea room was available everywhere, even facing death, even in the most terrifying moment of his life. He didn't become a warrior that day. He remained exactly who he was, a tea master, a man of peace. But he discovered that peace itself was a kind of strength that warriors don't understand. This is what meditation practice offers. Not a technique for escaping difficult situations, but training in presence that you can bring to any situation. The stillness you find on the cushion doesn't stay on the cushion. It comes with you into the rest of your life. There was a Zen monk named Ryokan who lived alone in a small hut on a mountainside in Japan about 200 years ago. He owned almost nothing. A few robes, a begging bowl, some brushes for calligraphy. He spent his days writing poetry, playing with the village children, and sitting in meditation. People found his simplicity puzzling. He was a brilliant man, educated and talented, from a wealthy family. He could have had status and comfort. Instead, he chose a leaky hut and a life of poverty. One autumn night, a terrible storm came to the mountain. The wind howled and rain poured down in sheets. The roof of Ryokan's hut began to leak in a dozen places. Water dripped onto his sleeping mat, onto his few books, onto the floor. The wind found every crack in the walls and filled the tiny space with cold. A visitor who had been caught on the mountain by the storm took shelter with Ryokan that night. He expected to find the monk miserable, scrambling to protect his belongings, cursing his bad luck. Instead, he found Ryokan sitting calmly in the corner of his hut, wrapped in his thin robe, watching the storm through the gaps in his walls. "Aren't you upset?" the visitor asked. "Your home is being destroyed. Everything is getting wet." Ryokan smiled. "The storm is doing what storms do. Should I be angry at the rain for being wet? Should I shout at the wind for blowing? But what will you do? Right now, I am watching a storm. It is quite beautiful, actually. Listen to how the wind sounds in the trees. Look at how the lightning makes everything bright for a moment." The visitor was amazed. He had never met anyone who could sit so peacefully in the middle of chaos. "But tomorrow," the visitor pressed, "when the storm is over, You'll have to repair your roof, dry your things. Tomorrow I will do what tomorrow requires, Ryokan said. But that is tomorrow. Right now, there is only this storm, this moment, this breath. Why would I ruin this moment by worrying about the next one? They sat together through the night. The visitor, despite the cold and wet, found himself strangely peaceful. Something about Ryokan's calm was catching, like warmth from a fire. When morning came and the storm had passed, the visitor helped Ryokan patch his roof. The work was simple and even pleasant. The sun was out, the air was fresh, and they worked in companionable silence. As the visitor prepared to leave, he asked Ryokan one more question. How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when everything is falling apart around you? Ryokan thought for a moment. The storm is outside, he said finally. But in here, he touched his chest, it is always still. I have learned to live from here, from this quiet place. The world can rage all it wants. It cannot touch what is deepest in me. The visitor carried those words with him for the rest of his life. Years later, when he faced his own storms, he would remember that leaky hut, that calm monk, that simple teaching. The storm is outside. Inside, it is always still. Ryokan was not pretending the storm wasn't happening. He wasn't using positive thinking to convince himself everything was fine. His roof really was leaking. His things really were getting wet. He would really have work to do when morning came. But he understood something that most of us miss. Suffering comes not from the storm itself, but from our argument with the storm. From our insistence that this shouldn't be happening. From our mental time travel into tomorrow's problems while we're still in today. The rain was just rain. The wind was just wind. His mind was the thing that could turn rain into disaster, wind into tragedy. And his mind was also the thing that could simply let rain be rain. This is what Buddhist teachers mean when they talk about acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up, but stopping the war with reality. The storm is here. It's already here. Fighting against its existence doesn't make it go away. It just adds a layer of suffering on top of the original discomfort. Ryokan had practiced stillness for so many years that he could find it even in chaos. This didn't make his life easier in any material sense. He was still poor. His hut still leaked. But he had found something that poverty couldn't touch and storms couldn't shake. This is what all the meditation masters point to. There is a stillness inside you that cannot be disturbed by circumstances. It's not something you have to create or achieve. It's already there, waiting to be noticed. When you sit in meditation, you're not building this stillness. You're uncovering it. Layer by layer, you let go of the noise and activity and worry, and what remains is a quiet that was there all along. The Buddhist tradition calls this our true nature. It's not something special that only monks and masters possess. It's what you are, underneath all the doing and thinking and worrying. The clouds may cover the sky, but the sky is always there. The waves may churn on the surface, but the ocean depths remain calm. You've probably touched this stillness before, even if you didn't have a name for it. Maybe it was a moment in nature when everything suddenly felt peaceful and right. Maybe it was holding a sleeping child and feeling time stop. Maybe it was a moment of deep focus when the busy mind finally fell quiet. These moments show you what's always available. The practice of meditation just helps you find your way there more reliably, more often, eventually even in the middle of a storm. There's a common misunderstanding about meditation that's worth addressing. Many people believe that good meditation means having no thoughts. They sit down, thoughts arise, and they think they're doing it wrong. But the Zen masters are very clear about this. The point is not to stop thinking. The point is to change your relationship with thinking. Thoughts will come. That's the nature of having a brain. The question is, do you get swept away by every thought, or can you let thoughts pass like clouds while you remain still? Imagine you're sitting by a river, watching the water flow by. Leaves and sticks float past. You see them, you notice them, but you don't jump in and try to grab each one. You just watch. The river keeps flowing. You stay on the bank. This is how to be with thoughts. They flow through your mind like a river. You don't have to stop the flow. You just don't have to jump in. Sometimes the river is calm and clear. Sometimes it's wild and muddy. Either way, you can sit on the bank and watch. The stillness isn't about what's happening in the river. It's about where you're sitting. The world will keep moving. Phones will keep buzzing. People will keep needing things from you. Nothing we've talked about will change that. But you can change. You can learn to carry stillness with you even when everything around you is in motion. Like Takeno facing the samurai. Like Ryokan sitting in the storm. You can find that place inside where it's always quiet, and you can learn to live from there. This doesn't mean becoming passive or withdrawn. The most peaceful people are often the most effective. When you're not wasting energy on anxiety and distraction, you have more to give. When you're fully present, you see more clearly and respond more wisely. Stillness is not the opposite of action. It's the ground from which right action arises. Think about the most effective people you know. Not the busiest ones, but the ones who actually get things done well. Often, there's a quality of calm about them. They're not rushing around in a panic. They're not scattered and frantic. They move with purpose and presence. This is what the Buddhist tradition calls wise action. It comes from stillness, not from agitation. When you're calm, you see the situation clearly. You respond to what's actually happening, not to your fears about what might happen. You don't waste energy on worry or distraction. Everything goes where it's needed. The anxious mind tells you that you need to worry in order to be prepared. That if you stop being vigilant for one moment, something terrible will slip past your defenses. But this is a lie. Worry is not preparation. It's just suffering in advance. True preparation comes from presence, from seeing clearly, from being grounded enough to respond to what actually arises instead of fighting imaginary battles in your head. We began by talking about a world that never stops moving. But here's what the Zen masters discovered. You don't need the world to stop. You just need to stop yourself, even briefly, even for a few breaths. In that stopping, something settles. In that settling, something opens. In that opening, you remember what you already are. Not the busy person running from task to task. Not the worried mind spinning through problems. But the stillness underneath all of that. The awareness that was there before the noise began and will be there after it ends. This stillness is your birthright. It's not something you have to earn or achieve. It's simply something to uncover, to return to remember. And with practice, with patience, With the gentle discipline of showing up again and again, it becomes more available. Not just on the cushion, but in the kitchen. Not just in silence, but in noise. Not just when life is easy, but right in the middle of the storm. That's what we're learning here. That's what all of this is pointing to. You carry peace with you already. You just have to remember where you put it. Take a breath and feel your body resting. Let that be enough for now. We've looked at the restless mind. We've explored the power of stillness. Now we come to something that might be the most important teaching of all, and also the most misunderstood. Letting go. These two words get used a lot. Self-help books tell you to let go. Well-meaning friends tell you to let go. You probably tell yourself to let go. But what does it actually mean? And why is it so hard? The Buddha taught that clinging is at the root of our suffering. Not pain itself, but the way we grip onto things. We cling to pleasant experiences, wanting them to last forever. We cling to ideas about how life should be. We cling to our sense of who we are and how others should see us. We cling to the past. We cling to our fears about the future. All this clinging creates tension. It's like making a fist and holding it tight all day long. After a while, your hand aches. Your arm is exhausted. You've used so much energy just holding on. And here's the strange part. Most of the time, we don't even know we're doing it. The gripping has become so normal that we've forgotten there's another way. Letting go isn't about forcing yourself to stop caring. It isn't about becoming cold or detached. It isn't about pretending things don't matter. It's about softening the grip, opening the fist, allowing things to be as they are, even when they're not as you wish they were. This is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself, and one of the hardest to learn. There was a Zen master who had a cup that he loved very much. It wasn't valuable in any worldly sense. Just a simple clay cup, handmade, with a small chip on the rim and a glaze that had worn thin in places. But he had used this cup every day for 30 years. He had drunk his morning tea from it thousands of times. It had been with him through everything, a quiet companion to his days. His students noticed how carefully he handled this cup, how he washed it gently after each use and placed it back on its shelf with attention. Some of them thought it was strange that a Zen master, who taught non-attachment, would be so devoted to a simple cup. One morning, a young student was helping clean the master's room. He picked up the cup to dust the shelf beneath it, and it slipped from his fingers. It fell to the stone floor and shattered into pieces. The student was horrified. He stood frozen, staring at the broken cup, his face white with shame. He had destroyed the master's most treasured possession. He didn't know what to say. He couldn't even look up when he heard the master enter the room. There was a long silence. The student waited for anger, for disappointment, for some kind of punishment. He could hear his own heart beating. Then the master knelt down beside him and began picking up the pieces, one by one, carefully, almost tenderly. "I'm so sorry," the student finally managed to say. "I know how much this cup meant to you. I was careless. I've ruined something irreplaceable." The master looked at him with gentle eyes. "You haven't ruined anything," he said. "You've just shown me what was always true." "What do you mean?" The master held up one of the broken pieces, turning it in the light. From the very first day I received this cup, it was already broken. Do you understand? Everything that can break will break. Everything that can end will end. This isn't sad news. This is simply the truth of how things are. He set the piece down with the others. I loved this cup, he continued. I still love it. But I never made the mistake of thinking it would last forever. Every morning when I drank from it, I knew it might be the last time. This didn't take away from my enjoyment. It made it deeper. I was fully present with the cup because I knew our time together was borrowed. The student was quiet, taking this in. The cup was always going to break, the master said. Today, tomorrow, next year, 100 years from now. What difference does it make? What matters is that I appreciated it while it was whole. What matters is that I didn't waste our time together worrying about losing it. He smiled at the student. And now a new teaching begins. How to appreciate the memory of the cup. How to let go of what is gone. How to find peace with empty hands. He stood up slowly and looked at the empty space on the shelf where the cup had always sat. Clean up these pieces carefully, he said. And thank you. You have given me a good lesson today. The student gathered the broken pieces with great care, wrapping them in cloth. He expected to throw them away, but something made him keep them instead. Years later, when he had become a teacher himself, he would sometimes take out those broken pieces and show them to his own students. He would tell them the story of that morning, of his shame and the master's gentle response. He would hold up a fragment of glazed clay and say, "This taught me more about letting go than any book or lecture ever could." And his students would look at the broken pieces and understand something that words alone could never convey. That we can love what is broken. That we can find peace with what is gone. That letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means holding differently. This story shows us what letting go really means. It doesn't mean not loving things. The master loved his cup deeply. It doesn't mean being detached or cold. His care for the cup was obvious to everyone. What it means is not adding extra suffering on top of the natural flow of life. Things come and things go. That's just how it is. When we accept this deeply, we can love fully without the constant fear of loss poisoning our experience. The Buddha called this kind of clinging upadana. It's the grasping that says, this must stay exactly as it is. This must not change. I cannot be okay unless things remain the way I want them. But nothing remains. Everything changes. And when we demand permanence from an impermanent world, we set ourselves up for endless suffering. Letting go is simply aligning yourself with reality. Not fighting against the nature of things. Not exhausting yourself trying to hold back the tide. The master wasn't pretending the cup didn't matter. He was saying, it mattered and it's gone, and I can be at peace with both of those truths. There's another story, simpler but equally powerful, about a teacher and her student. This student had been practicing meditation for several months. She was earnest and dedicated, sitting every morning before dawn, following all the instructions carefully. But she wasn't finding the peace she was looking for. If anything, she felt more frustrated than when she began. One day, she came to her teacher in distress. "I'm doing everything right," she said. "I sit in the correct posture. I follow my breath. I try so hard to let go of my thoughts. But nothing is working. My mind is just as busy as ever. I feel like I'm failing at this." The teacher listened quietly. Then she asked the student to hold out her hand. The student did so, palm up. The teacher placed a small stone in the student's palm. "Close your hand around this," she said. "Hold it tightly." The student made a fist around the stone. "Now, I want you to let go of the stone." The student opened her hand. The stone sat in her palm. "No," said the teacher. "You haven't let go. The stone is still there." The student was confused, but I opened my hand. I stopped gripping. "Yes, you stopped gripping." But letting go isn't just about opening your fingers. Turn your hand over. The student turned her hand palm down. The stone fell to the ground. "That is letting go," said the teacher. "It's not just releasing your grip. It's allowing things to fall away completely. It's not holding on with one hand while pretending to release with the other." She looked at the student kindly. "You say you are trying hard to let go of your thoughts. But trying hard and letting go are opposites. You cannot force yourself to release something. The effort itself is a kind of gripping." The student sat with this for a moment. "So, what do I do?" "Stop trying to let go. Just let go. There's a difference. When a leaf falls from a tree, it doesn't try to fall. It just falls. When you exhale, you don't try to release the breath. You just release it." She picked up the stone and handed it back to the student. "Practice with this. Hold it. And then simply let it go. Don't think about letting go. Don't make a project of letting go. Just open your hand and let what falls, fall." The student took the stone home and practiced just as her teacher suggested. She would hold the stone, feel its weight, notice her grip, and then she would simply turn her hand over and let it drop. At first, it felt too simple. She kept waiting for some deeper technique, some secret teaching that would make everything click. But her teacher just told her to keep practicing with the stone. After a few weeks, something started to shift. She noticed that the act of releasing the stone was beginning to echo through her practice. When a thought arose during meditation, she found herself able to let it go the same way she let go of the stone. Not fighting it, not pushing it away, just allowing it to fall from her awareness naturally. She realized that all her striving had been another form of holding. She had been gripping her idea of what meditation should feel like, what progress should look like, what peace should feel like. And all that gripping was the very thing preventing her from finding what she sought. One morning, she came to her teacher with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of relief. "I finally understand," she said. "I was holding on to letting go. I was trying to achieve non-attachment. The contradiction was right there all along, but I couldn't see it." Her teacher smiled. "And now? Now I just sit. Thoughts come and I let them go. Feelings come and I let them go. I'm not trying to get anywhere. I'm just here." "Good," said the teacher. "You have learned the lesson of the stone." This teaching points to something important. Letting go is not another thing to do. It's not a task to accomplish or a goal to achieve. It's more like an allowing, a softening, a stopping of the effort to hold on. We make it so complicated. We think we need special techniques, the right words, the perfect moment. But letting go is the most natural thing in the world. We do it every time we exhale. We do it every time we fall asleep. We do it every time we set something down. The problem is that we've forgotten how natural it is. We've gotten so used to gripping that releasing feels strange, even frightening. What am I without my worries? Who am I if I'm not holding on to my stories, my grievances, my fears? These questions can feel threatening. But here's what the Zen masters discovered. What remains when you let go is not emptiness. It's freedom. It's space. It's the chance to be fully here, unburdened by everything you were carrying. Let's talk about what we actually hold on to, because it's not usually what we think. We think we're holding on to people, situations, things. We think if we just grip hard enough, we can keep them from changing or leaving or ending. But really, we're holding on to our ideas about these things, our expectations, our demands that reality be a certain way. There's a Zen saying, "The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon." We get so attached to our ideas about things that we forget the ideas are not the things themselves. We fall in love with the map and forget about the territory. A mother clings to her idea of who her child should become. When the child grows into someone different, she suffers. Not because her child is wrong, but because reality doesn't match her picture. She's clinging to a map while the actual territory has gone somewhere beautiful she never imagined. A man clings to his idea of what a successful career looks like. When his path takes an unexpected turn, he suffers. Not because the new path is bad, but because it's not what he had imagined. He's still carrying an old map while standing in new and potentially wonderful country. We cling to the idea that we should be further along by now, that life should be easier, that people should treat us differently, that we shouldn't have to feel this way. All these shoulds, all these demands, they're the real source of our gripping. And they're all in our minds. They're not in reality. Reality is just doing what it does. We're the ones arguing with it. This is what Buddhist teachers mean when they talk about the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. Bodies get sick. Hearts get broken. People we love go away. That's the nature of human life, and no amount of spiritual practice will change it. But suffering, the Buddha taught, is optional. Suffering is what we add on top of pain through our resistance, our demands, our insistence that things should be other than they are. Pain is the wound. Suffering is picking at the wound, refusing to let it heal, making it worse with our constant attention and upset. When we let go of our demands, we don't let go of the pain. We let go of the suffering. We allow the wound to be a wound, to heal in its own time, without adding more damage through our struggle against it. Letting go, then, is mostly an inner movement. It's releasing the ideas, the expectations, the demands. It's allowing reality to be what it is, without requiring it to be something else first. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop working toward things you care about. The Buddha was very active. He walked hundreds of miles. He taught for 45 years. He helped countless people. But he wasn't attached to outcomes. He did what he could, and he let go of the rest. This is the middle path. Not pushing and forcing and demanding. Not giving up and withdrawing and going numb, but engaging fully with life while holding it all lightly. There's a practice in Buddhism called metta, usually translated as loving kindness. It involves silently repeating phrases of goodwill toward yourself and others. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. At first glance, this might not seem related to letting go, but there's a deep connection. When you practice metta towards someone you're struggling with, you're letting go of your grievance. You're releasing the grip of resentment. You're not saying what they did was okay. You're just choosing not to carry the burden of anger anymore. When you practice metta toward yourself, you're letting go of harsh self-judgment. You're releasing the idea that you need to be perfect to be worthy of kindness. You're putting down the weight of shame and self-criticism. Letting go, at its heart, is an act of kindness. It's kind to yourself because you stop suffering unnecessarily. It's kind to others because you stop demanding they be different than they are. The tight fist of clinging helps no one. It doesn't change the past. It doesn't control the future. It just makes your hand hurt. But when you open your hand, when you let what needs to fall away, something beautiful becomes possible. Compassion flows more freely. Connection becomes easier. You have room for what's actually here instead of being crowded out by everything you're holding on to. There's another thing to say about letting go, and it might be the most important. Sometimes, letting go happens on its own. We think we have to do something, to work at releasing, to figure out the right technique. And sometimes that's helpful. But often, letting go is less about doing and more about ripening. You carry something for as long as you need to carry it. And then one day, without any special effort, you notice it's not so heavy anymore. The grief has softened. The anger has faded. The fear has loosened its grip. You didn't force this to happen. You just lived. You kept breathing, kept sitting, kept paying attention. And in that patient presence, something completed itself. I think of a woman I heard about who had carried resentment toward her father for 30 years. He had been cold and distant when she was growing up, and she had spent decades wishing he had been different, wishing she had received the love she needed. She tried to let go. She really tried. She read books about forgiveness. She went to therapy. She wrote letters she never sent. But the resentment stayed, like a stone in her chest. Then one day, visiting her father in the nursing home where he now lived, lost in dementia, not even recognizing her face, something shifted. She looked at this frail old man who couldn't remember her name, and suddenly the whole story just fell away. Not because she decided to let go, not because she performed some technique, but because she was finally ready. The fruit was ripe, and it fell from the tree. She wept for a long time that day. Not from grief or anger, but from relief. 30 years of carrying something, and now her hands were empty. She could finally put it down. This is why gentleness matters so much. If you beat yourself up for not letting go fast enough, you're just adding more tension, more gripping, more to eventually release. But if you can be kind to yourself, patient with yourself, trusting that things unfold in their own time, then letting go becomes more like a natural process and less like a battle. The Zen tradition speaks of practice as a kind of gardening. You prepare the soil, you plant seeds, you water and weed and wait, but you don't force the flowers to bloom. They bloom when they're ready. Your job is just to create the conditions. Letting go is like that. You create the conditions through practice, through awareness, through kindness toward yourself. And then you trust the process. Some things will release quickly. Others will take years. That's okay. You're not on anyone else's schedule. You're not in a race. You're just walking your path, one step at a time, letting go of what you can, trusting that the rest will follow when the time is right. We started this by talking about clinging and the suffering it creates. But let us end somewhere gentler. Letting go is not about becoming someone who doesn't care. The Zen masters cared deeply. The Buddha's whole life was devoted to helping others. Compassion flows through all these teachings like water through a river. What you're releasing is not your capacity to love. You're releasing the fear that makes love into grasping. You're releasing the tension that turns care into control. You're releasing the tight grip that squeezes the joy out of everything it touches. When you let go, you don't lose anything real. You lose the extra suffering you were adding to life. You lose the exhaustion of constant gripping. You lose the burden of demanding that everything stay the same forever. And what you gain is space, room to breathe, freedom to be present for what's actually here, the ability to love fully without being imprisoned by fear. The master loved his cup more after he understood it would break someday. The student found peace only when she stopped trying so hard to achieve it. This is the paradox of letting go. In releasing, we receive. In opening our hands, we find they're full. Notice where you might be holding on right now. And with great gentleness, see if you can soften just a little. There is a simple truth at the heart of Buddhist teaching that can change everything once you really understand it. Anxiety cannot exist in the present moment. It seems to exist here. It feels like it's happening now. But if you look closely, you'll find that anxiety is always about somewhere else, some other time, some imagined future or remembered past. Think about the last time you felt anxious. What was your mind doing? Almost certainly, it was somewhere other than where your body was. It was rehearsing a conversation that hadn't happened yet, or replaying one that was already over. It was imagining worst-case scenarios, building elaborate mental movies of disasters that might never come. It was time traveling, leaving the present moment behind while your body sat there alone, heart racing, palms sweating, responding to something that wasn't actually happening. This is how anxiety works. It hijacks your attention and carries it away from here and now, from this breath and this moment, into territories that exist only in your mind. And as long as you follow it there, as long as you believe that the imagined future is real and demands your immediate attention, anxiety will continue to run your life. But there's good news hidden in this understanding. If anxiety lives in the future and the past, then the present moment is a refuge. It's a place anxiety cannot follow you if you truly arrive there. Not a future present that you're imagining, not a memory of a past present, but this one, right here, right now, as your eyes move across these words and your lungs draw breath. The Zen masters understood this deeply, and they developed practices specifically designed to help us return to the present moment again and again. They knew that presence isn't a destination you arrive at once and then stay forever. It's more like a home you keep coming back to, a refuge you can always find when you remember to look for it. There is perhaps no Zen story more famous than the tale of the man, the tiger, and the strawberry. It has been told for centuries, passed from teacher to student, across countless generations, because it captures something essential about what it means to be fully present, even in the most terrifying circumstances. A man was walking through the forest when he heard a rustling in the brush behind him. He turned and saw a tiger emerging from the trees, eyes fixed on him, muscles tensing for the chase. The man did what anyone would do. He ran. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, crashing through branches and leaping over roots, his heart pounding so hard he could hear nothing else. The tiger pursued him, getting closer with every stride. The man could hear its breath now, could almost feel the heat of it on his back. Then the forest ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff. The man skidded to a stop, sending pebbles cascading down into the void below. He looked back at the tiger, now just 20 paces away and closing. He looked down at the cliff, a sheer drop into rocky darkness. There was nowhere to go. But then he noticed a thick vine growing over the edge of the cliff, snaking down into the mist below. Without thinking, he grabbed the vine and swung himself over the edge, beginning to climb down as quickly as he could. The tiger arrived at the top and paced back and forth, growling in frustration but unable to follow. The man breathed a momentary sigh of relief. But then he looked down and saw something that turned his blood cold. At the bottom of the cliff, barely visible through the mist, another tiger waited. It had heard the commotion and come to investigate, and now it sat there patiently, looking up at him, knowing that eventually he would have to come down. So there he hung, suspended between two tigers, clinging to a vine over an abyss. And then, as if his situation weren't desperate enough, he heard a small sound above him. He looked up and saw two mice, one white and one black, gnawing at the vine where it attached to the cliff top. With each bite, the vine frayed a little more. It was only a matter of time before it gave way entirely. The man closed his eyes. Tiger above, tiger below, mice chewing through his only lifeline. There was absolutely nothing he could do. No escape, no solution, no way out. This was it. And then, when he opened his eyes, he noticed something he had missed before. Growing from a crack in the cliff face, just within reach of his hand, was a single wild strawberry plant. And on it, one perfect red strawberry, glistening with morning dew. He looked at the tiger above. He looked at the tiger below. He felt the vine tremble as the mice continued their work. And then he reached out, plucked the strawberry, and put it in his mouth. How sweet it tasted. The story ends there. We don't know what happened next. Perhaps the vine broke and the man fell. Perhaps one of the tigers lost patience and found a way down the cliff. Perhaps, in a turn that the story doesn't bother to include, he was somehow rescued. It doesn't matter. The story isn't interested in what happened next. It's only interested in that one moment, that one strawberry, that one act of complete presence in impossible circumstances. This story disturbs people sometimes. They want the man to escape somehow, to find a clever solution, to be rescued at the last moment. The lack of resolution feels unsatisfying, even cruel. But the story isn't about escape. It's about something far more important. The man in the story is all of us. The tigers are all the dangers and difficulties that threaten us from every direction. Past regrets and future fears, illness and loss, and the certainty of death. The mice gnawing the vine are time itself, wearing away at our lives moment by moment. We are all hanging over an abyss with no way out. And yet, there are strawberries. There are moments of sweetness available to us even in the midst of our precarious situation, even when everything is uncertain and nothing is guaranteed. The question is, will we notice them? Will we allow ourselves to taste them? Or will we be so consumed by the tigers that we miss the sweetness entirely? This is what presence offers. Not a solution to your problems, not an escape from difficulty, but the ability to be fully here for whatever is happening right now, including the strawberries. The man couldn't change his situation, but he could change his relationship to it. He could stop struggling against what was already true and simply be where he was. And in that being, he found something beautiful. I think of all the strawberries I've missed in my own life, all the moments of simple beauty or connection or peace that I was too distracted to notice because my mind was busy with its tigers. The warmth of sunlight that I walked through without feeling because I was rehearsing an argument. The laughter of children that I heard but didn't really hear because I was calculating finances in my head. The taste of food that I swallowed without tasting because my attention was on a screen. Most of us spend our lives so focused on the tigers that we never notice the strawberries at all. We're so busy worrying about what might happen next that we miss what's happening now. We're so lost in thoughts about the past and future that we're absent for the present, which is the only place life actually occurs. The man on the cliff didn't achieve enlightenment or transcend his fear or become someone special. He just tasted a strawberry. He just allowed himself, for one moment, to be fully where he was instead of lost in where he might soon be. That's all. And that's everything. There's a teaching in Zen called Shoshin, which translates as beginner's mind. It points to a way of meeting each moment fresh, without the burden of all your accumulated ideas and expectations, without the weight of everything you think you already know. A beginner approaches things with openness and curiosity because they don't yet have fixed ideas about how things should be. They're willing to be surprised. They're able to see what's actually in front of them rather than just confirming what they already believe. But as we gain experience, we tend to lose this openness. We start to think we know how things work. We develop expectations and opinions. We stop really seeing and start just recognizing, fitting everything into categories we've already established. The world becomes smaller, more predictable, less alive. Beginner's mind is the practice of recovering that original freshness, approaching each moment as if for the first time, even when you've experienced something similar 1,000 times before. It's the practice of presence, because you can only truly be present when you're not lost in your ideas about what's happening. Anxiety is the opposite of beginner's mind. Anxiety approaches each moment loaded with expectations, most of them negative. It sees danger everywhere because it's looking for danger. It predicts disaster because that's its job, to scan for threats and prepare you for the worst. Anxiety doesn't meet the moment fresh. It meets the moment with a whole suitcase full of fears and assumptions that it unpacks before even looking at what's actually there. But when you practice presence, when you cultivate beginner's mind, you give yourself the chance to actually see what's in front of you. And what's in front of you, in this present moment, is almost never as bad as what anxiety was imagining. There's another story, this one from China, about a wealthy merchant who came to visit a famous Zen master. This merchant was very successful in the worldly sense, with a large trading business, many employees, and a beautiful home filled with expensive things. But despite all his success, he was miserable. His mind never stopped churning with worries about his business, his competitors, his future. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't enjoy his food. He couldn't be present with his family because his thoughts were always elsewhere, calculating and planning and fearing. He had heard that this particular Zen master was very wise, that he had helped many people find peace. So the merchant made the long journey to the master's simple temple in the mountains, hoping to find relief from his endless anxiety. When he arrived, the master welcomed him warmly and invited him to sit for tea. The merchant, eager to get to the point, immediately began describing his problems. He talked about the pressures of his business, the deals that might fall through, the competitors who were always trying to undercut him, the employees who might be stealing from him, the economy that might turn at any moment. He talked and talked, barely pausing for breath, pouring out all his worries as if emptying a bucket of dirty water. The master listened quietly, nodding occasionally, saying nothing. When the merchant finally ran out of words, the master picked up the teapot and began to pour tea into the merchant's cup. The merchant watched as the tea rose in the cup. It reached the halfway point, then 3/4, then the brim. And still the master kept pouring. The tea overflowed the cup and spilled onto the table, running across the surface and dripping onto the floor. "Stop," the merchant exclaimed. "Can't you see the cup is full? No more will go in." The master set down the teapot and smiled. "Yes," he said gently. "And you are like this cup. You come to me asking for wisdom, for peace, for a way out of your suffering. But you are already so full of your own opinions and worries and plans that there is no room for anything new to enter. How can I give you anything when there is nowhere for it to go?" The merchant was quiet for a moment, looking at the tea still dripping from the edge of the table. Something in his chest loosened slightly, though he couldn't have said what. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice softer now. "First, you empty the cup," said the master. "Not all at once, perhaps, but little by little. You begin to notice when you are full, when your mind is overflowing with thoughts and worries, and you practice setting some of them down. You make space. You create room for silence, for presence, for something other than the endless noise of your own thinking. But how? My worries are real. My business really could fail. My competitors really are trying to take my customers. How can I just ignore these things?" The master shook his head. "I'm not asking you to ignore anything. A thought is not a problem. A worry is not a problem. The problem is when your mind is so crowded with thoughts and worries that there's no space left for anything else. You've filled your cup so completely that you can't even taste the tea." He gestured at the cup, still surrounded by the puddle of overflow. "When you drink tea, just drink tea. Don't drink your worries about tomorrow's meeting. Don't drink your regrets about yesterday's decision. Just taste what's in your mouth. Feel the warmth of the cup. Be here with this simple experience. That is where peace lives. Not in solving all your problems, not in eliminating all uncertainty, but in being fully present for this one moment, whatever it contains." The merchant stayed at the temple for 3 days. He didn't receive elaborate teachings or secret techniques. He simply practiced being present. He drank tea and just drank tea. He ate meals and just ate meals. He walked in the garden and just walked in the garden. At first, his mind rebelled. It kept pulling him back to his worries, back to his endless planning and calculating. But the master had given him a simple instruction. Whenever you notice you've drifted away, just come back. Don't fight the drifting. Don't judge yourself for it. Just notice and return. By the third day, something had shifted. The merchant still had thoughts about his business, but there was more space around them now. They didn't fill his entire cup anymore. There was room for other things too. Room for the taste of tea. Room for the beauty of sunlight on leaves. Room for a moment of simple peace in the midst of his complicated life. When he left, the master gave him one final teaching. "The cup will fill again," he said. This is the nature of the human mind. It loves to think, to plan, to worry. Don't be discouraged when you find your cup overflowing once more. Just notice it and empty it again. This is not failure. This is the practice. The merchant bowed deeply, something he would not have done 3 days earlier, when he had arrived full of self-importance and urgency. "One more thing," the master said. "Don't wait until the cup is overflowing to empty it. Don't wait until you are drowning in your thoughts before you remember presence. Practice a little every day. Drink 1 cup of tea with full attention. Take 1 walk where you notice what's around you, instead of planning your next move. These small moments of presence will keep the cup from filling so completely. They will remind you that there is always another way to be." The merchant went back to his business, back to his competitors and his deals and his endless responsibilities. But he was different now, not because his circumstances had changed, but because he had learned to empty his cup. He had learned that peace was not something he had to achieve or earn or wait for. It was something he could touch in any moment, simply by being fully there for it. Years later, when the merchant was an old man, he would tell this story to his grandchildren. He would pour tea until the cup overflowed, making them laugh at the mess, and then he would explain what the master had taught him. He would say that it was the most valuable teaching he ever received, worth more than all the gold he had earned in his long career. Because the gold was spent now, but the ability to empty his cup, to return to presence, to find peace in the midst of activity that had been with him every day for the rest of his life. This is what the Zen masters mean when they talk about presence as refuge. Not escape from life's difficulties, but a way of meeting them differently. Not elimination of anxiety, but a place anxiety cannot follow you when you truly arrive there. The present moment is almost always okay. Really, pause and consider this. Right now, in this specific instant, as you read these words, are you in danger? Is something terrible happening to your body at this exact moment? Almost certainly not. Almost certainly, you are safe, breathing, existing in a moment that contains no actual emergency. The emergencies are in your thoughts. The danger is in your imagination. The catastrophe is in the future you're constructing in your mind. But here, now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, things are usually manageable. Even good. Even beautiful, if you can pause long enough to notice. This doesn't mean you ignore real problems or pretend everything is fine when it isn't. When action is needed, take action. When planning is necessary, plan. But recognize the difference between useful engagement with reality and anxious spinning in your imagination. The first happens in the present, addressing actual circumstances. The second happens in your head, fighting ghosts that may never appear. Let's talk practically about how to find this refuge, how to return to presence when your mind has wandered off into past or future. The simplest doorway is always your breath. Your breath is happening now. It's not happening yesterday or tomorrow. Every inhale, every exhale is an anchor to the present moment. When you notice you've drifted, when anxiety has carried you away into its imagined scenarios, you can always come back by feeling your breath move in and out. Not controlling it or changing it, just feeling it, letting it remind you that you're here, now, in this body, in this moment. Your senses are another doorway. What do you hear right now? Not what you heard earlier, not what you might hear later, but right now. What sounds are present in this moment? What do you feel where your body contacts the chair or floor or bed? What do you see when you really look? Not just glancing, but actually seeing the colors and textures and light in your immediate environment. These are not special techniques reserved for meditators and monks. They're simply ways of coming back to what's real, what's actually happening, instead of staying lost in the stories your mind is telling. Anyone can do this. You can do this right now, between one sentence and the next. Just feel your breath. Just notice what you hear. Just look at what's in front of you. That's presence. That's the refuge. The practice is not about staying present forever. That's not how human minds work. You will drift away 1,000 times a day. Your thoughts will carry you into the past, into the future, into fantasies and worries and plans. This is normal. This is not failure. The practice is about returning. Every time you notice you've drifted, you have a choice. You can follow the thought further into its imagined territory, or you can come back. And every time you choose to come back, every time you return to the breath, to the senses, to this present moment, you strengthen the pathway home. You make it easier to find your way back next time. Over time, this changes things. Not by eliminating your thoughts or curing your anxiety, but by giving you more space around them. The thoughts continue, but you're not so completely lost in them. The anxiety arises, but it doesn't consume you the way it used to. You have a refuge now, a place you know how to find, and that knowledge itself brings a kind of peace. The merchant learned this. The man on the cliff, in his own way, learned it too. And countless others, across thousands of years, in every culture and circumstance, have discovered the same simple truth. Presence is always available. The present moment is always here, waiting for you to arrive. No matter how far your mind has wandered, no matter how full your cup has become, you can always come back. You can always begin again. There's something else important to understand about presence, something that might seem paradoxical at first. Being fully present doesn't mean everything feels good. Presence isn't about curating your experience to include only pleasant sensations and peaceful feelings. It's about being willing to be here for whatever is actually happening, including the difficult stuff. Sometimes what's present is grief. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's physical pain or emotional turmoil or profound uncertainty. Presence doesn't mean escaping these experiences. It means meeting them directly, without the extra layer of resistance and avoidance that usually makes them worse. There's a difference between pain and suffering, as we discussed before. Pain is what's actually happening. Suffering is what we add through our struggle against it. When you're present with difficult experiences, without fighting them or running from them, you often find that they're more bearable than you expected. Not because they're less painful, but because you're not adding the extra weight of resistance. This is advanced practice, and it takes time to develop. Start with the easier moments. Practice presence when things are relatively calm. Build your capacity for being here. And then, gradually, as that capacity grows, you'll find you can bring it to harder moments too. You'll find that even in difficulty, presence offers something valuable. Not escape, but a way of meeting what is without losing yourself in it. The man hanging from the vine didn't escape his situation. The tigers were still there, above and below. The mice were still gnawing. Nothing about his circumstances improved when he ate the strawberry. But he tasted it. He was fully present for that one moment of sweetness in the midst of his impossible situation. And that presence, that willingness to be where he was and experience what was available, transformed the moment from pure terror into something else, something that included terror but was larger than terror, something that had room for sweetness too. This is what presence offers you. Not a solution to your problems, not an escape from difficulty, not the elimination of anxiety, but a way of being here, fully here, for whatever your life actually contains, including the strawberries. Every breath is an invitation back to now. Every sensation is a doorway to presence. Every moment you remember to return, you step out of the imagined futures and remembered pasts where anxiety lives, and you come home to the only place life actually happens. You don't have to be good at this. You just have to practice it. Return and return and return. And slowly, breath by breath, moment by moment, you'll find that the refuge was here all along, waiting for you to arrive. Feel your next breath enter your body. Feel it leave. You are here, and that is enough. Everything changes. The weather, the seasons, the cells in your body. Your thoughts change from moment to moment. Your emotions rise and fall. Even the mountains are slowly wearing away into the sea. This might sound like sad news. We tend to hear impermanence as a threat, and we cling to what we love, feeling betrayed when it changes. But Buddhism offers a completely different perspective. It suggests that impermanence is not tragedy, but liberation. That the very thing we fear most about life is also what makes freedom possible. That understanding impermanence deeply, not just intellectually but in your bones, can transform your relationship with anxiety in a way that nothing else can. The Buddha taught that impermanence, called anicca in the ancient Pali language, is one of the three fundamental marks of existence. Everything that arises also passes away. Every beginning contains its ending. Every moment is already becoming the next moment, flowing and changing without pause. When you truly understand this, something shifts. You stop clinging so desperately to the good because you know it cannot stay. You stop fighting so hard against the difficult because you know it cannot last. You find a different kind of peace, not the peace of permanence, which doesn't exist, but the peace of flowing with change rather than against it. And here's what matters most for those of us who struggle with anxiety. If everything changes, then your anxiety must change too. The panic you feel right now will not feel this way forever. The worry that seems so permanent, so much a part of who you are, is actually just weather passing through. It arose, it will pass, like everything else in this impermanent world. There is a story from the time of the Buddha that has been told for 2,500 years passed down through countless generations because it speaks to something so fundamental about human suffering and the possibility of peace. It is the story of a young mother named Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami lived in a small village in ancient India. She had grown up poor and unremarkable, and when she married, she moved into her husband's family home, where she was treated as a servant rather than a daughter. But then she gave birth to a son, and everything changed. The family celebrated. Her status transformed overnight. She was no longer invisible. She was the mother of the heir, and she was loved. She poured everything into this child. He was her joy, her meaning, her reason for living. She watched him learn to crawl, to walk, to speak his first words. She held him through fevers and nightmares. She couldn't imagine life without him. She didn't want to imagine it. Then, when the boy was still very young, he became ill. It happened quickly, as these things sometimes do. One day he was playing in the courtyard, and a few days later, he was dead. Kisa Gotami held his small body and felt her world collapse entirely. This could not be happening. This was not acceptable. This could not be real. She refused to accept that her son was gone. She carried his body through the village, knocking on every door, asking if anyone had medicine that could bring him back. People looked at her with pity and confusion. Some tried to explain gently that the child was beyond medicine now. Others turned away, unable to bear her grief. But Kisa Gotami kept searching, kept asking, kept believing that somewhere there must be a cure for death. Finally, someone suggested she visit the Buddha, who was teaching nearby. Perhaps this great sage would have the medicine she sought. Kisa Gotami made her way to where the Buddha was staying, still carrying her son's body, still hoping. She pushed through the crowd and fell at his feet, begging him for medicine that would restore her child to life. The Buddha looked at her with great compassion. He did not tell her that her son was dead and she needed to accept it. He did not lecture her on impermanence or the nature of suffering. Instead, he said, "I can help you. But first, you must bring me something. Go back to the village and bring me a mustard seed. Just one small mustard seed. But it must come from a house where no one has ever died. No parent, no child, no spouse, no sibling. A house that has never known death." Kisa Gotami felt hope surge in her chest. A mustard seed. That was all. Such a simple thing. She bowed to the Buddha and rushed back to the village, still carrying her son, now filled with desperate purpose. She knocked on the first door. An old woman answered. "Do you have a mustard seed?" Kisa Gotami asked. "Yes, of course," said the woman. "But tell me, has anyone in this house ever died?" The old woman's face changed. "My husband died 2 years ago. I miss him every day." Kisa Gotami moved to the next house. Yes, they had mustard seeds. But death had visited here too. A daughter, lost to fever. The father still wept when he spoke her name. She went to the next house, and the next, and the next. Every home had mustard seeds. Every home had also known death. A grandmother who slipped away in her sleep. A brother killed in an accident. A baby who never took its first breath. Every single house, without exception, had been touched by loss. At one home, an elderly man invited her to sit and rest. She was exhausted by now, having walked the entire village twice over. The man brought her water and sat with her in silence for a while. Then he told her about his wife, who had died 10 years ago, and about how he still set a place for her at the table every evening. "The grief doesn't go away," he said, "but it changes. It becomes softer, gentler. It becomes something you can live with, even something you're grateful for, because it means you loved deeply. That's not nothing." Kisa Gautami listened, holding her son's body, and something in her began to crack open. This old man had lost his beloved, and he was still here. He was still living, still capable of kindness to a stranger, still able to speak of his wife with love rather than only pain. At another house, a young woman about her own age answered the door. When Kisa Gautami explained what she was looking for, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "I lost my first child," she said. "A little girl. She lived only 3 days." She looked at the bundle in Kisa Gautami's arms and understood immediately what had happened. Without another word, she stepped forward and embraced Kisa Gautami, this stranger, this fellow member of the most terrible club in the world. They stood there for a long moment, two mothers who had buried their children, holding each other in the doorway. As the day wore on, something began to shift in Kisa Gautami. She started to really listen to the stories people told her. She saw their grief, still raw in some cases, softened by time in others. She saw that she was not alone in her suffering. She saw that death was not a punishment visited upon her specifically, not evidence that the universe was cruel or that she had done something wrong. Death was simply part of life, woven into every family, every home, every human story since the beginning of time. By evening, she had not found a single house untouched by death, and she realized that she never would. Such a house did not exist. It could not exist. Death was universal, the one experience that every human being shares, the great equalizer that no one escapes. She stopped searching. She found a quiet place outside the village, and finally, after all those hours of desperate seeking, she sat down with her son's body and allowed herself to grieve. Not the frantic, refusing grief of the morning, but something deeper and strangely more peaceful. She wept for her son. She wept for all the mothers who had lost children. She wept for the fragility of life, for the preciousness of every moment, for the love that exists knowing it will one day end. And in that weeping, something released. She understood what the Buddha had been trying to show her. Not that she shouldn't grieve, not that her loss didn't matter, but that her experience was not separate from the experience of all humanity. She was not alone in her suffering. She was joined to every person who had ever loved and lost, connected by the universal truth of impermanence. She buried her son with tenderness, and then she returned to the Buddha, empty-handed but somehow full. She sat at his feet and asked to become his student. She spent the rest of her life practicing, teaching, and helping others who were drowning in grief find their way to the shore. The story tells us that she became particularly skilled at helping those who had lost loved ones. She would sit with them in their grief, not trying to fix it or rush it, but simply being present. She understood what they were going through because she had walked that same path. And she could offer them what the Buddha had offered her, not a cure for impermanence, but a way to live with it. Not an escape from loss, but a transformation of the relationship to loss. She never forgot her son. She carried him with her always, in her heart, in her motivation to help others, in her deep understanding of how precious and fragile life is. But she was no longer broken by his death. She had found a way to let grief become wisdom, to let loss become compassion, to let impermanence become freedom. This story is not about accepting death with passive resignation. Kisa Gautami didn't stop loving her son. She didn't pretend the loss didn't hurt. She grieved fully and deeply, as we all must when we lose what we love. But something changed in her understanding. She stopped fighting against the nature of reality. She stopped asking, "Why me?" and started to see that impermanence touches everyone equally. She stopped isolating herself in her suffering and recognized that she was part of a vast human community, all of whom know loss, all of whom walk the same path from birth to death. This is what understanding impermanence offers. Not numbness, not indifference, but a different relationship with change. When you know that everything passes, you can love fully, without the desperate clinging that turns love into anxiety. You can grieve fully without the added suffering of believing your grief should not exist. You can meet life as it actually is, flowing and changing, rather than demanding it be something it cannot be. The Buddha didn't give Kisa Gautami what she asked for. He gave her something better. He gave her a way to live with loss, to find peace not by escaping impermanence, but by embracing it. There's another teaching that flows from this understanding, one that applies directly to anxiety and the difficult states of mind that can make life feel so unbearable. A young monk was struggling. He had come to the monastery seeking peace, but instead he found his mind more turbulent than ever. Without the distractions of ordinary life, he was forced to sit with his anxiety, his fear, his endless worried thoughts. He felt like he was drowning. He went to his teacher, an old nun who had practiced for 50 years, and confessed his despair. "I came here to find peace," he said, "but I found only suffering. My mind is a storm that never stops. I don't think I can do this." The old nun listened patiently. When he finished, she didn't immediately respond. Instead, she stood and walked to the window, looking out at the sky. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. "Do you see that storm?" The young monk nodded. "It looks fierce, doesn't it? The sky is dark. The wind is picking up. Soon there will be thunder and lightning and rain so heavy you can barely see through it." The monk nodded again, unsure where this was going. "Tell me," said the old nun, "has a storm ever lasted forever?" The monk considered this. "No," he said. "Storms always pass." "Always," the old nun agreed. "Without exception. Some are brief, some last for days, but eventually every storm exhausts itself and the sky clears. This is simply how weather works. Do you argue with this? Do you think storms should be permanent? Of course not. Then why do you argue with the storms in your mind? Why do you believe that your anxiety will last forever when nothing else does?" The young monk was quiet. He had never thought of it quite this way. "Your difficult states are weather," the old nun said, turning from the window to look at him directly. "They are not climate. Climate is the average over time, the general pattern. Weather is what's happening right now, and weather always changes." She sat down across from him, her eyes kind but direct. When the storm is raging, it feels like it will never end. This is the nature of storms, both outside and in. They are so loud, so consuming, so present, that we forget there was ever clear sky. We forget that clear sky will return. We identify with the storm completely and believe it is who we are. But you have lived long enough to know better. You have survived many internal storms. Think back. Every bout of anxiety you have ever experienced has ended. Every dark period has eventually lifted. Every time you were certain you couldn't go on, you went on anyway. Not because you did something heroic, but simply because everything passes. That is the law of this universe. The young monk felt something loosen in his chest. It was true. He had felt this despair before, many times. And it had always passed. Somehow, he had always found his way back to steadier ground. "So what do I do when the storm is happening?" he asked. "How do I survive it?" You don't fight it. Fighting a storm only exhausts you. You don't pretend it isn't happening. Denial doesn't make weather disappear. You simply remember that it is weather. You remind yourself, as many times as you need to, that this is temporary. You take shelter where you can, you wait, and you trust that clear sky is on the other side. She smiled gently. And here's what you'll discover with practice. The more you remember that storms are temporary, the less frightening they become. They're still unpleasant. You wouldn't choose them. But they lose their power to make you believe your life is over, that you'll never feel okay again, that this moment of difficulty defines your entire existence. You start to see them as just weather, and you stop taking them so personally. The young monk returned to his practice with a different perspective. When anxiety arose, he didn't try to force it away, and he didn't collapse into believing it would last forever. He simply noted, "This is weather. This will pass." Sometimes he had to remind himself 100 times in a single sitting. But slowly, over months and years, something changed. The storms still came, but he was no longer terrified of them. He knew how to wait. He knew that clear sky always returned. Years later, when he had become a teacher himself, a student came to him with the same desperate question he had once asked. And he told her about the old nun, about the storm outside the window, about weather and climate. He watched understanding dawn in her eyes, the same understanding that had once dawned in his. "But I should warn you," he added, "this teaching is simple but not easy. You will forget it 1,000 times. You will get lost in the storm and believe it will never end, over and over again. This is not failure. This is just how it works. The practice is remembering as many times as it takes. Each time you remember, you build the path a little stronger. Each time you come back to this truth, it becomes a little more available." He smiled, remembering his own long journey, all the storms he had weathered, all the times he had forgotten and remembered and forgotten again. "Be patient with yourself," he said. "The sky is always there behind the clouds, whether you can see it or not. Your job is not to clear the sky. Your job is just to remember that clear sky exists, even in the darkest storm. That remembering is enough." This teaching speaks directly to anxiety, because anxiety has a way of convincing you that it will never end. When you're in the grip of anxious thoughts, they feel so real, so permanent, so much a part of who you are that you can't imagine ever being free of them. Anxiety whispers, "This is just how you are. This will always be your experience. There is no escape." But impermanence says otherwise. Impermanence points to the evidence of your entire life. Every difficult state you have ever experienced has ended. Not a single moment of suffering has actually lasted forever, no matter how much it felt that way at the time. The very anxiety that grips you now arose at some point, which means it wasn't always here, which means your life contains states other than this one. And if it arose, it will pass. This is not wishful thinking. This is the nature of reality. Everything that comes into being also passes out of being. Everything that begins also ends. Your anxiety is not exempt from this universal law. This doesn't mean you shouldn't take action to address your anxiety. It doesn't mean you should just wait passively for it to disappear. But it does mean you can hold it more lightly. You can stop adding the extra layer of suffering that comes from believing your current state is permanent. You can remind yourself, as often as you need to, that this is weather, not climate. There's a phrase that has been used across many traditions, so common it has almost become cliché. This too shall pass. But clichés become clichés because they contain truth. And this one contains perhaps the most important truth there is. This too shall pass. The anxiety you're feeling right now. The worry that keeps you awake. The fear that something terrible is about to happen. The racing heart and the tight chest, and the thoughts that won't slow down. All of it will pass. And here's the thing that sometimes gets forgotten. This applies to pleasant experiences too. The joy you feel, the peace, the moments of contentment and ease. These will also pass. This is not meant to make you sad or cynical about the good things in life. It's meant to help you appreciate them while they're here, without clinging to them so tightly that you create suffering for yourself when they inevitably change. Impermanence cuts both ways. It means you don't have to be crushed by difficulty because difficulty won't last forever. And it means you can be fully present for joy because joy is precious and fleeting and deserves your complete attention while it's here. This is the freedom that impermanence offers. Freedom from the desperate clinging that tries to freeze pleasant experiences in place. Freedom from the hopeless despair that believes painful experiences will never end. Freedom to flow with life as it actually is, changing moment by moment, rather than constantly fighting the current. Let's bring this back to practical experience. Right now, as you listen to these words, your experience is already changing. The breath you took a moment ago is gone. The thought you had a few seconds ago has been replaced by a different thought. The sensations in your body have shifted, even if only slightly. Nothing about your experience right now is identical to your experience a minute ago. Nothing about your experience a minute from now will be identical to right now. You are a river, not a stone. You are weather, not a fixed object. When you really pay attention to this, something relaxes. The solid sense of me having this problem starts to feel less solid. The anxiety that seemed like such a permanent fixture starts to reveal its edges, its arising and passing, its nature as a temporary phenomenon rather than an eternal truth. This is not intellectual understanding. This is something you can feel directly in your experience right now if you pay close attention. Notice how this moment is already gone. Notice how the next moment is already changing. Notice how nothing stays, how everything flows, how the river of experience never stops moving. Your anxiety is part of this river. It is not a boulder blocking the flow. It is water, just like everything else, moving and changing and passing. You don't have to remove it or fix it or conquer it. You just have to let it flow through, trusting that the nature of rivers is to keep moving. Kisa Gautami discovered this truth through walking from door to door, searching for a house that death had never touched. The young monk discovered it through years of watching his own internal storms arise and pass. And you can discover it too, through paying attention to your own experience, through noticing how nothing lasts, through remembering that every difficult moment in your past eventually ended. You have already survived everything life has thrown at you. Not because you're special, but because impermanence is the nature of things. The darkest moments passed. The worst anxiety eased. The periods when you were certain you couldn't go on eventually gave way to periods when going on felt possible again. This is not a small thing. This is evidence. This is proof that impermanence applies to your suffering just as much as it applies to everything else in this universe. So when anxiety arises, and it will, you can meet it with this understanding. Not fighting, not fleeing, not pretending it isn't there. Just remembering, this is weather. This has arisen, and it will pass. I have survived every storm so far, and I will survive this one too. This is impermanence as freedom. Not freedom from change, which is impossible, but freedom through change. The knowledge that nothing is permanent means nothing is hopeless. The knowledge that everything passes means relief is always on the way. The storms of anxiety will come. This is part of being human, part of having a mind that tries to protect you by imagining dangers, part of living in a world full of uncertainty. But they will also go. They always have before. They always will again. You are not your storms. You are the sky in which they arise and pass. And the sky is never damaged by the weather that moves through it. Notice what is present for you right now. And notice that even as you notice it, it is already changing, already becoming something else. So much of our anxiety comes from a single belief that runs beneath everything else, that this moment, as it is not enough. That we are not enough. That something is missing, something needs to be fixed, something must change before we can finally relax and be at peace. Buddhism has a word for this endless wanting, tanha. It's usually translated as craving or thirst, and it points to something deeper than simply wanting things. It's the constant reaching for the next moment, the perpetual dissatisfaction with what is, the feeling that life is happening somewhere else and we're missing it. You know this feeling, that restless sense that you should be doing something other than what you're doing, the inability to sit still without reaching for your phone, the way a pleasant moment gets interrupted by thoughts about what might go wrong, or what you should do next, or whether this will last. There's always something more to want, more to worry about, more to achieve before you can be okay. But what if you're already okay? What if this moment, exactly as it is, contains everything you actually need? Not everything you want, perhaps. Not the ideal circumstances you've been waiting for, but enough. Simply enough. This is one of the most radical teachings in Buddhism, and one of the hardest to accept in a culture that profits from your dissatisfaction. It says that contentment is possible right now, not when you get the promotion or find the relationship or solve all your problems. Now. There's an old story told in many versions across different cultures, about a stone cutter who lived in a small village at the foot of a great mountain. This stone cutter spent his days chipping away at rock, shaping blocks for buildings and bridges. It was hard work, and his hands were rough and calloused, his back always aching by evening. He earned enough to live simply, a small house, a patient wife, food on the table. By any reasonable measure, he had a good life. But he couldn't see it that way. He looked at what others had and felt his own life was lacking. The merchants had soft hands and fine clothes. The officials were carried through town while he walked on his own 2 feet. Everyone, it seemed, had it better than him. One day, while delivering stones to a wealthy merchant's house, he saw how the merchant lived. Silk robes, fine food, servants attending to every need. The merchant reclined on cushions while others worked around him. He didn't have to lift anything heavy. He didn't have to squint against stone dust. He simply gave orders and things were done. The stone cutter felt a wave of envy wash through him. How wonderful it must be to be a merchant, he thought. To have such wealth, such comfort, such power over others. And in that moment, through some mysterious grace, his wish was granted. He became a wealthy merchant with all the fine things he had envied. He wore silk now instead of rough cloth. He ate delicacies instead of simple rice. He gave orders instead of taking them. For a while, he was happy. But then summer came, and the heat was oppressive. He sat in his fine house, sweating through his silk robes, fanning himself uselessly. He looked out the window and saw a high official passing by in a grand procession. Servants holding a canopy over him to block the sun, attendants fanning him as he moved. How wonderful to be a high official, the merchant thought. Even the sun cannot touch him. And again, his wish was granted. He became a high official, carried through the streets in a covered sedan chair, shielded from the elements, feared and respected by all. But then he noticed something. Despite the canopy, despite the fans, the sun still beat down mercilessly. The crops withered in the fields below. Rivers began to dry up. The sun was more powerful than any official, more powerful than any human authority. The sun is the most powerful thing of all, he thought. I wish I were the sun. And he became the sun, blazing down on the earth, feared by farmers and merchants and officials alike. He felt truly powerful now. Nothing could stand against him. But then a cloud drifted across the sky, blocking his rays, casting shadow on the land below. He could not burn through it. He could not push it aside. The cloud is more powerful than the sun, he realized. I wish I were a cloud. And he became a cloud, blocking the sun, gathering moisture, releasing rain when and where he chose. He flooded fields and filled rivers. He made farmers look up at the sky in hope or despair depending on his mood. He was more powerful than the sun. But then a wind came, pushing him across the sky against his will, scattering his form, sending him tumbling helplessly across the heavens. He tried to hold together, but the wind was relentless, tearing him apart, dispersing him across miles of sky. The wind is more powerful than clouds, he thought. I wish I were the wind. And he became the wind, howling across the land, bending trees, whipping up waves, driving rain before him, unstoppable by any force. Ships feared him. Farmers cursed him. Birds were thrown off course by his strength. He was power itself, invisible and irresistible. But then he encountered a great mountain that would not move. He blew against it with all his force. He screamed around its peaks. He tried for days to shift it even slightly. But the mountain stood firm, ancient and immovable, barely noticing his fury. The mountain is more powerful than the wind, he thought. I wish I were a mountain. And he became a great mountain, tall and immovable, looking down on the world with stone indifference. The sun could not move him. The wind could not shake him. The clouds passed around him. He was the most powerful thing of all. But then he felt something at his base. A small, persistent tap, tap, tap. He looked down and saw a tiny figure with a hammer and chisel, chipping away at his stone. A stone cutter. And in that moment, the man understood. He had traveled in a great circle, chasing power, chasing position, always wanting to be something other than what he was. And where had it led him? Right back to where he started. The stone cutter was chipping away at the mountain, just as he had once chipped away at rock. Small, yes, but persistent, steady, content to do his work without wishing to be the sun or the wind or a cloud. The spell broke, and the man found himself back in his village, hammer in hand, stone before him. The sun was setting, casting long golden light across the quarry where he worked. His back still ached. His hands were still rough. His house was still small. But something had changed. He looked at his rough hands and remembered what it felt like to be silk-robed and soft, and he felt no envy. He looked at the setting sun and remembered burning down on the earth, and he felt no longing to return to that power. He felt only the simple pleasure of being exactly what he was, in exactly this place, doing exactly this work. His wife called him for dinner. He set down his tools and walked home, noticing the quality of light, the smell of cooking fire, the sound of his neighbors talking in their doorways. He had walked this path 1,000 times without seeing it. Tonight, he saw it. At dinner, his wife served the same simple rice and vegetables they ate every night. But tonight, he tasted it. He was present for the meal in a way he had never been before, when his mind was always reaching towards something better, something more. "You seem different," his wife said, watching him. "I went on a long journey today," he said, "and I ended up right back here. And for the first time, I don't want to be anywhere else." He lived the rest of his days as a stone cutter. He never became wealthy or powerful or famous. But he had found something that wealth and power could never buy: the ability to be satisfied with his own life, as it actually was, without needing it to be something else first. This story points to something important about the nature of wanting. We think that if we just get the next thing, we'll finally be satisfied. If we just achieve the next goal, reach the next level, acquire the next possession, then we'll be happy. But the goalposts keep moving. There's always something more to want, always another rung on the ladder, always someone who has what we don't. The stonecutter discovered what Buddhist teachers have been pointing to for thousands of years, that the problem isn't with what we have, but with the endless wanting itself. Peace doesn't come from getting more. It comes from realizing that what you have is already enough. This doesn't mean you stop working or striving or improving your life. The stonecutter still cut stone after his adventure. He still did his work, still earned his living, still participated fully in life. But he did it without the gnawing sense that he should be somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else. There's a word in Buddhism for this kind of contentment, santosa. It doesn't mean complacency or settling for less than you deserve. It means finding the sufficiency in what is, even while you work toward what could be. It means being at peace with this moment, even as you take steps toward the next. A student once went to a famous Zen master with a question that had been troubling him for years. "Master," he said, "I have read all the teachings. I have practiced meditation diligently. I understand that I should be content with what I have. But I'm not. I still want things. I still feel that something is missing. What is wrong with me?" The master didn't answer right away. Instead, he invited the student to join him for the midday meal. They sat together, and the master served them both rice and vegetables. Simple fare, nothing special. The master ate slowly, with obvious attention. He seemed to be enjoying every bite, as if it were the finest feast. The student ate quickly, barely tasting the food, eager to get back to his question. When the meal was finished, the master set down his bowl and looked at the student. "Did you taste the rice?" The student hesitated. "I ate it, yes." "That's not what I asked." "Did you taste it? Were you there for the eating of it?" The student realized he had barely noticed the food. He had been thinking about his question, about what the master would say, about his problem with contentment. The rice had just been fuel consumed while his mind was elsewhere. "Most people," the master said, "eat their rice while thinking about something else entirely. They sit with friends while planning tomorrow. They walk through beautiful gardens while rehearsing arguments. They lie in comfortable beds while worrying about things that may never happen. And then they wonder why they're not content." He smiled gently. "You say you want to be content with what you have, but you're never actually with what you have. Your body is here, but your mind is always reaching for something else. How can you know if this moment is enough when you've never truly arrived in it?" "But the wanting," the student pressed. "The feeling that something is missing. It's always there. The wanting is just another experience arising in consciousness," the master said. "It comes, it goes, like everything else. You don't have to obey it. You don't have to believe it when it says this isn't enough. You can notice the wanting without following it anywhere." He picked up the empty rice bowls. "Tomorrow, when you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you sit, just sit. Not to achieve contentment, but just to be where you are. Contentment doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from being fully present for what you already have." The student began to practice in this way. It wasn't easy. His mind had spent decades reaching for the next thing, and it didn't stop reaching just because he told it to. But he kept coming back. When he noticed he was eating while planning, he returned to the taste of food. When he noticed he was walking while worrying, he returned to the feeling of his feet on the ground. At first, he could only manage a few moments of true presence before the mind pulled him away again. It was frustrating. He had expected that understanding the teaching would make it easy to practice. But the gap between understanding and embodiment was vast. He returned to the master after several weeks, discouraged. "I try to be present," he said, "but I fail constantly. My mind won't stay where I put it." The master laughed, not unkindly. "You've been training it to wander for your entire life. Now you're training it differently. This takes time. How much time? How long did it take you to learn to read? To walk? Some things cannot be rushed. The mind learns through repetition, through gentle persistence, through coming back again and again without judgment. You're not failing. You're practicing. Every time you notice you've wandered and return, that is the practice. That is success. The student continued. He stopped expecting quick results. He stopped judging himself for wandering. He just kept returning, day after day, meal after meal, step after step. And slowly, something shifted. Not all at once, but gradually, like dawn breaking. He found moments of sufficiency that he had never noticed before. The warmth of sunlight on his face. The satisfaction of a task completed. The simple pleasure of a conversation with a friend when he was actually there for it. One morning, he woke up and lay in bed for a few minutes before rising. Not planning his day, not worrying about what needed to be done, just lying there, feeling the warmth of the blankets, hearing the birds outside, being present for the simple fact of being alive, comfortable, safe. And he realized something. This was contentment. Not a grand spiritual achievement, not a permanent state of bliss, but just this, being present for what was already good in his life, instead of always reaching for something more. He still had wants. He still had ambitions and preferences and goals. But they no longer ran his life. He could want something and still be at peace. He could prefer a different outcome and still accept what was happening. The wanting was there, but he was no longer consumed by it. He returned to the Master one more time, not with a question, but with gratitude. "I understand now," he said. "Contentment isn't somewhere else. It's here, when I'm actually here for it." The Master smiled and poured them both tea. "Then let's drink tea," he said. And they did. This is what contentment actually looks like. Not the absence of desire, but a different relationship to desire. Not getting everything you want, but being present for what you have. Not achieving some special state, but simply arriving fully in the ordinary moments of your life. Anxiety feeds on the belief that this moment is not enough, that you should be further along, that things should be different, that you can't rest until various conditions are met. But conditions are never perfectly met. There's always something that could be better, always some threat on the horizon, always some gap between how things are and how you think they should be. The practice of contentment doesn't close that gap. It teaches you to live peacefully with it, to stop demanding that reality match your preferences before you'll allow yourself to be okay, to find the sufficiency that exists in every moment if you're present enough to notice it. There's a famous Zen exchange that goes like this. A student asks the Master, "What is enlightenment?" The Master replies, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student is confused. But everyone does that. What's special about eating when hungry and sleeping when tired? The Master shakes his head. No. Most people, when eating, are thinking of 1,000 things. When sleeping, they are dreaming of 1,000 worries. Eating is not eating. Sleeping is not sleeping. They are never where they are. This points to something essential. We think contentment is about having the right circumstances, the right job, the right relationship, the right amount of money, the right state of health. But Zen suggests it's about something much simpler and much harder, actually being present for your circumstances, whatever they are. When you're fully present, even simple things become rich. A cup of tea becomes an experience of warmth and taste and comfort. A walk becomes a conversation with the world through your senses. An ordinary conversation becomes a genuine connection. But when you're not present, even wonderful things feel empty. You're on vacation but thinking about work. You're with people you love but mentally rehearsing conflicts. You're surrounded by beauty but scrolling through your phone. Contentment isn't something you find out there, in better circumstances. It's something you cultivate in here, through the quality of your attention. Let's be honest about something. This teaching is hard. We live in a culture that constantly tells us we're not enough, that we need more, that satisfaction is just one purchase or achievement or transformation away. Advertising depends on your dissatisfaction. Social media shows you everyone else's highlight reel while you live your ordinary days. The message that you might already have what you need is almost revolutionary in its simplicity. Buddhism doesn't ask you to pretend you don't have real problems or to be satisfied with genuinely harmful situations. If something needs to change, work to change it. If something is truly wrong, address it. Contentment isn't passive acceptance of injustice or suffering, but it does invite you to examine the voice that's never satisfied, that always finds something wrong, that won't let you rest even when rest is appropriate. It invites you to question whether your anxiety is actually helping you or just adding another layer of suffering to whatever you're facing. Often, when we look honestly, we find that the anxiety isn't protecting us or preparing us. It's just noise. The problem would still be there without the anxiety. We could still address it, probably more effectively, from a place of calm presence rather than frantic worry. The anxious mind tells us that contentment is dangerous, that if we stop worrying, we'll become complacent, miss something important, fail to prepare for disasters. But this isn't true. You can be content and still take care of what needs taking care of. You can be at peace and still work toward your goals. You can accept this moment as enough and still move thoughtfully into the next one. In fact, contentment often makes us more effective, not less. When we're not wasting energy on anxiety, we have more available for actually living. When we're not constantly reaching for the next thing, we can see more clearly what's right in front of us. Here's a simple practice you can try. Right now, wherever you are, ask yourself, what is actually wrong with this moment? Not what might go wrong tomorrow. Not what went wrong yesterday. Not what could go wrong in the imagined future your mind is constructing. Right now, in this specific moment, what is actually wrong? Usually, when we ask this question honestly, we find that the present moment is okay. We're breathing. We're alive. We're not in immediate danger. Whatever problems we have exist in other times, in memories or projections, not in this specific instant. This doesn't make the thoughts go away. It doesn't solve anything, but it creates a small gap, a moment of perspective. You can see that the anxiety is about something other than right now, and right now is actually okay. Try it again. Right here, right now. Are you okay? The roof over your head, if you have one. The breath in your lungs. The fact that you're able to listen to these words, that you have the time and inclination to seek peace. These are not nothing. These are, in fact, quite a lot. This is not about ignoring real problems or pretending everything is fine. It's about recognizing that most of the time, in most moments, we have what we need. The insufficiency we feel is usually about some other moment, some imagined scenario, some comparison to what we think we should have. This is the beginning of contentment. Not a grand declaration that everything is perfect, but a simple recognition that this moment, as it is workable. You can be here for it. You can meet it. You don't have to wait for better circumstances to begin being present for your life. The stonecutter traveled through all those forms, seeking power and position, always thinking the next thing would finally be enough. But he could only find peace when he stopped running, stopped wanting to be somewhere else, and settled into being exactly where he was. The student ate his rice while thinking about contentment, missing the contentment that was available right there in the eating. He could only find what he was looking for when he stopped looking and started actually tasting his food, actually living his life. These stories point to the same truth from different angles. What you're looking for isn't out there. It's here, in the quality of your presence, in your willingness to actually arrive in the moments you're given. You already have enough. Not in some abstract spiritual sense, but practically, right now, in this breath, in this moment. The sufficiency you seek is here. It always has been. The stonecutter went all the way around the world in his wanting. The student sat through countless meals with his mind elsewhere. Both of them had to learn the same lesson. What they were looking for was already present, hidden only by their constant reaching for something else. You don't have to travel that far. You can begin right now, with this breath, with this moment, by letting it be enough. Take a breath and notice where you are. For just this moment, let it be enough. We have walked a long path together through these hours. We've explored the restless mind and learned to watch it without being swept away. We've discovered stillness in the midst of motion and chaos. We've practiced the gentle art of letting go. We've found that presence is a refuge where anxiety cannot follow. We've seen that impermanence, far from being our enemy, is what makes freedom possible. We've touched the wisdom of enough, the contentment that comes from actually arriving in our lives. Now we come to the deepest teaching of all, the one that underlies everything else we've discussed. It concerns who you really are, beneath the anxiety, beneath the thoughts, beneath all the stories you tell about yourself and all the stories others have told about you. Buddhism teaches that there is something in you that has never been touched by your suffering, something that remains calm even when your mind is storming. Something that watches the anxiety without being the anxiety, that observes the fear without being consumed by it, that knows the thoughts without becoming lost in them. This is sometimes called Buddha nature. Not because you need to become a Buddha or achieve some special state, but because the same awareness that woke up under that tree 2,500 years ago is the same awareness looking out through your eyes right now. It's not something you have to create or earn or develop. It's what you already are, what you have always been, hidden only by the clouds of thought and identification that usually fill the sky of your mind. The anxious mind says you are broken. It says something is fundamentally wrong with you, that you need to be fixed or healed or transformed before you can be at peace. It points to all the evidence of your suffering and says, "See? You're a mess. You'll never be okay." But Buddha nature says something different. It says you are already whole. The peace you seek is already present, here, now, in this very moment. You have simply forgotten where to look. You've been searching everywhere out there for something that has been right here all along. There is a famous Zen story about two monks standing outside their temple, watching a flag flutter in the wind. It was a warm afternoon, and they had just finished their midday meal. The temple flag, inscribed with sacred symbols, was dancing in the breeze, and the two monks had stopped to watch it on their way back to the meditation hall. "The flag is moving," said the first monk, a young man who had been at the temple only a few years. "No," said the second monk, older and more experienced. "The wind is moving. The flag itself does nothing. It's the wind that creates the movement." "But look at it," the first monk insisted. "The flag is clearly moving. I can see it with my own eyes. The flag goes back and forth, rippling and waving. How can you say it's not moving? The flag only appears to move because the wind pushes it. Without wind, the flag would hang still. Therefore, it's the wind that truly moves. The flag is passive." They argued back and forth, each convinced he was right. "The flag is moving." "No, the wind is moving." "The flag." "The wind." Their debate grew heated, voices rising, neither willing to concede. Other monks began to gather, some taking one side, some the other. What had started as an idle observation was becoming a full-scale philosophical dispute. A senior teacher happened to be passing by and overheard their argument. He stopped and watched them for a moment, these earnest monks so caught up in their disagreement that they had forgotten they were supposed to be practicing peace. He could see their faces flushed with the need to be right, their bodies tense with the effort of convincing each other. "You are both wrong," he said quietly. The monks fell silent and turned to face him. The crowd that had gathered parted to let him through. "It is not the flag that moves. It is not the wind that moves." He paused, looking at each of them with gentle but penetrating eyes. "It is your mind that moves." The monks stood there, mouths open, the argument suddenly empty. They looked at the flag, still fluttering. They felt the wind, still blowing, and something shifted in their understanding. Nothing had changed about the scene in front of them. The flag still moved in the wind, or the wind still moved the flag, however you wanted to describe it. But their argument, their heated debate, their certainty that they were right and the other was wrong, all of that was happening in their minds. The movement they were arguing about was less important than the movement of their own thoughts, their own positions, their own need to be correct. The young monk later said it was the most important moment of his training. Not because the teacher had resolved the question of whether the flag or the wind was moving, but because he had shown them something they hadn't seen. They were lost in the movement of their own minds, unable to step back into the stillness from which they could see clearly. This is one of the most important Zen stories ever told, and it points to something essential about anxiety and peace. We spend so much energy arguing with reality. We debate endlessly about what's happening, what it means, what should be done, whether things are good or bad, whether we are good or bad. We are like those two monks, caught up in our positions, certain we see things correctly, exhausting ourselves in mental struggle. But there is something that watches all of this. There is an awareness that can notice the flag, notice the wind, notice the monks arguing, notice your own thoughts arising in response. This awareness is not taking sides. It is not caught up in the debate. It simply observes, clearly and calmly, whatever is happening. When the teacher said, "It is your mind that moves," he was pointing to something beyond the content of the argument. He was pointing to the fact that both monks were identified with their thoughts, lost in the movement of their own minds, unable to see from the still point that existed before they started debating. That still point is available to you. It is, in fact, what you most fundamentally are. It's the calm that our title speaks of, the calm, anxious mind that becomes possible not through silencing thoughts, but through recognizing what you are beneath them. Another story tells of a student who came to his teacher in despair. "I feel broken," the student said. "I've been practicing for years, but my mind is still a mess. I still get anxious. I still get caught in thoughts. I still suffer. There must be something wrong with me at the core. Maybe I'm just not capable of peace." The teacher listened without interrupting. When the student had finished pouring out his frustration, the teacher stood and said, "Come with me." They walked in silence through the temple grounds, past the meditation hall, past the kitchen, past the gardens, until they reached a small pond at the edge of the property. It was evening, and the full moon was rising in the east. The surface of the pond was choppy. A breeze had picked up, and small waves rippled across the water. The teacher pointed at the pond. "Look at the moon's reflection," he said. The student looked. Because of the waves, the reflection was fragmented, broken into 1,000 pieces. It shimmered and wavered, sometimes disappearing entirely as a larger ripple passed through, then reappearing, still broken, still scattered. "Is the moon broken?" the teacher asked. The student looked up at the sky. The moon hung there, full and perfect, completely unaffected by the choppy water below. "No," the student said. "The moon is fine. It's only the reflection that looks broken. And when the water stills," as if on cue, the breeze died down. Slowly, the ripples subsided. The surface of the pond grew calm. And there, in the water, the moon's reflection appeared, whole and perfect, a mirror image of the sky above. "The moon was never broken," the teacher said. "Even when the reflection was scattered, the moon itself remained whole. The disturbance was only on the surface." He turned to face his student directly. "You are like that moon. Your true nature has never been broken, never been damaged, never been touched by any of the storms that have passed through your life. When your mind is choppy, when thoughts and anxieties ripple across the surface, you look at the reflection and think you are broken. But that's not what you are. That's just the surface." The student stared at the now still pond, at the perfect moon reflected there. "Then why does it feel so broken?" he asked. "Why does the suffering feel so real?" "Because you identify with the ripples instead of the moon. You look at the surface and think that's who you are. But the surface is just activity. It comes and goes. Beneath it, you remain. Whole, untouched, perfectly at peace." They stood together for a long time, watching the moon in the water. Occasionally, a small breeze would return and the surface would stir, breaking the reflection into fragments again. Then it would still, and the moon would return, whole as ever. "This is what meditation shows you," the teacher said finally. "Not how to stop the ripples. You can't control the wind, but how to recognize what you really are. how to stop identifying with the disturbed surface and remember the moon that was never broken. The student returned to his practice with new understanding. When anxiety arose, he tried to remember, this is a ripple on the surface. When thoughts churned and his mind felt chaotic, he tried to remember, beneath this, I am still here, whole, the awareness that watches the storm without being the storm. It wasn't easy. Years of habit had taught him to identify completely with whatever was happening on the surface. But slowly, with practice, he began to notice something. Even in his most anxious moments, there was a part of him that knew he was anxious. A witnessing presence that observed the suffering without being consumed by it. That presence was always calm, always still, always there, no matter how choppy the surface became. He realized that the teacher had been pointing to this all along. Not to some special state he needed to achieve, but to something that was already present, already whole, already at peace. He just had to learn to recognize it, to rest in it, to remember it when the ripples made him forget. Years later, when this student had become a teacher himself, he would often take his own students to that same pond on full moon nights. He would wait until the water was still, let them see the perfect reflection, and then throw a stone into the center. "Is the moon broken?" he would ask, as ripples scattered the image into 1,000 fragments. "No," his students would say, understanding. "Then don't believe your mind when it tells you that you are." He would often add one more thing, something his teacher hadn't said but that he had discovered through his own practice. The ripples are not a problem. The water is allowed to move. But you must remember what you are looking for. If you want to see the moon clearly, wait. Be patient. The water always stills eventually. And when it does, you will see that what you thought was broken was whole all along. This is what all the Zen masters point to. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not the anxiety that visits you, or the fear that grips you, or the worry that won't let go. You are the awareness in which all of this appears. Think about it for a moment. When you're anxious, there's anxiety, yes. But there's also the knowing of anxiety. Something is aware that this experience is happening. Something notices the racing heart, the spinning thoughts, the uncomfortable sensations. What is that something? It's not the anxiety itself. The anxiety is the experience. But there's also an experiencer, a witness, an awareness that knows the anxiety is happening. And that awareness is not itself anxious. It can't be. Awareness is like a mirror. A mirror reflects whatever appears before it, but it never becomes what it reflects. A mirror can show fire without burning. It can show water without getting wet. It can show the most terrible images without being harmed, the most beautiful images without grasping at them. It remains unchanged by whatever passes across its surface. You are like that mirror. Experiences pass through you. Thoughts arise and dissolve. Emotions come and go. Sensations appear and disappear. But the awareness that knows all of this remains. It doesn't come and go. It's always here. The constant background to every experience you've ever had. When you were 5 years old, you were aware. The content was different. The thoughts were different. The body was different. But the fundamental quality of being aware was the same. When you're 90, if you live that long, you'll still be aware. The content will have changed countless times, but awareness itself will remain unchanged, untouched. The same consciousness that has been with you through everything. This is what the Zen masters are pointing to when they talk about your true nature. Not some mystical state you have to achieve, but the simple fact of awareness that is present right now, in this very moment, reading these words. And when you rest in that awareness, instead of being caught in the content that passes through it, something shifts. The anxiety might still be there, but you're not identified with it. The thoughts might still spin, but you're watching from a place of stillness. You're the moon, not the ripples. You're the sky, not the clouds. You're the mirror, not the images that appear in it. Let's bring together everything we've explored in our time together. We set out to calm the anxious mind, and we've discovered that calming doesn't mean silencing or conquering. It means understanding. It means changing our relationship to what arises rather than fighting against it. We began by looking at the restless mind, the monkey swinging from branch to branch, and we learned that we don't have to follow every thought that arises. Thoughts are like empty boats, just drifting by, and we suffer when we add stories about them that aren't true. The master told his student that thoughts arise and pass on their own, like leaves falling from a tree, and our work is simply not to climb onto everyone. We explored stillness and discovered that peace isn't something we achieve through effort, but something we uncover when we stop struggling. Like the tea master facing the samurai, we found that presence itself is power, and calm is available even in chaos. Like Ryokan sitting in his leaking hut while the storm raged, we learned that the storm is outside, but inside, it can be still. We practiced the gentle art of letting go, releasing our grip on how we think things should be. The broken cup was already broken from the day it was made, and when we understand this, we can love fully without the clinging that turns love into anxiety. The student learned that letting go isn't about trying harder, but about turning the hand over and allowing what needs to fall to simply fall. We discovered that presence is a refuge. The man on the cliff, suspended between tigers, found a strawberry and tasted its sweetness. The present moment is almost always okay, and anxiety lives in the imagined future, not in now. The merchant learned to empty his cup so there was room for something other than worry. We learned that impermanence is not something to fear, but the very thing that sets us free. Every storm passes. Every difficult state ends. Kisa Gotami walked from house to house and discovered that she was not alone in her suffering, that loss is universal, and that even grief can become wisdom. The young monk learned from his teacher that his anxiety was weather, not climate, and weather always changes. We touched the wisdom of enough, discovering that this moment, as it is, contains what we need. The stonecutter traveled through every form of power, only to find peace in being exactly who he was. The student finally tasted his rice after years of eating while thinking about something else. And now, we come to the deepest truth. You are not the storm. You are the sky. You are not the ripples. You are the moon. You are not your anxiety. You are the awareness in which anxiety appears and dissolves, comes and goes, rises and falls, like everything else in this impermanent world. This is your true nature. It has never been damaged by anything that has happened to you. It is not broken and does not need fixing. It is simply here, waiting to be recognized, waiting for you to stop identifying with the passing weather and remember the vast sky that you are. The Buddha's final words to his students are among the most famous in spiritual history. He was dying, and his followers gathered around him, heartbroken and afraid. They asked him who would guide them when he was gone, who would teach them where they should turn for wisdom. And he said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." He didn't say, "Find a lamp out there somewhere." He didn't say, "Wait for someone to bring you light." He didn't point to a successor or a book or a set of rules to follow. He pointed inward. He said, "The light is already in you. You are your own lamp. You don't need anything external to find peace, because peace is not external. It's what you are when you stop covering it up with seeking and striving and suffering." This was his final gift, and it's the same teaching we've been exploring all along. You don't need to go anywhere or become anything. You just need to recognize what you already are. To stop, look, and see. This doesn't mean you won't have difficult times. You will. You're human, and human life includes pain, loss, uncertainty, and fear. The thoughts will still come. The emotions will still arise. The storms will still blow through. Being awake to your true nature doesn't mean you stop being human. But you can meet all of it from a different place now. From the place of stillness that exists beneath the noise. From the awareness that watches without being swept away. From the moon that remains whole no matter how choppy the surface becomes. When the Buddha told his students to be lamps unto themselves, he wasn't abandoning them. He was telling them the deepest truth he knew, that they already had everything they needed. That the teacher they were looking for wasn't outside them, wasn't going to die with him, wasn't something they could lose. It was their own awareness, their own capacity to see clearly, their own true nature that had been there all along. The same is true for you. You are already home. You have always been home. The peace you've been seeking everywhere else has been right here, waiting patiently for you to turn around and notice it. Anxiety will visit again. It's part of having a human mind, part of the ancient programming that once kept your ancestors alive in a dangerous world. When it does visit, you can remember what you've learned. You can watch the thoughts without believing them. You can let the emotions move through without identifying with them completely. You can return to your breath, your body, this present moment. You can remember that everything passes, that this too shall pass, that you have survived every storm so far. And beneath all of that, beneath the coming and going, the rising and falling, the endless movement of experience, you can rest in the simple truth of what you are. Awareness itself, the witness, the sky that holds all weather without being harmed by any of it, the moon that no amount of ripples can break. This is not something you need to become. It's something you already are, remembering itself through you, waking up in this very moment. Every time you notice that you are aware, you are touching your true nature. Every time you step back from the content of experience and rest in the awareness that knows the content, you are coming home. The journey to calm the anxious mind ends where it began, right here, right now, in this breath, in this moment, in this awareness that has been with you all along. There is a final story, and it's the simplest of all. A student asked a Zen master, "What is the most important thing?" The master said, "Attention." "And what is the second most important thing?" "Attention." "And the third?" "Attention." That's the whole teaching. Pay attention. Be present. Notice what is, without adding stories. Return, again and again, to this moment, this breath, this awareness that you are. Everything else we've discussed is just elaboration on this one simple point. The restless mind calms when you pay attention to it rather than being lost in it. Stillness arises when you pay attention to the present moment. Letting go happens when you pay attention to how you're holding on. Presence becomes a refuge when you pay attention to being here. Impermanence reveals itself when you pay attention to how everything changes. Contentment emerges when you pay attention to what you already have. And your true nature is recognized when you pay attention to who is paying attention. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to become anything. You just need to wake up, right here, right now, to what has been true all along. You are not your anxiety. You are the calm awareness in which anxiety comes and goes. You are not your restless thoughts. You are the stillness that watches them rise and fall. You are not your suffering. You are the peace that holds all suffering with compassion. This is who you have always been. This is who you will always be. And in recognizing this, again and again, moment after moment, you find the calm that no storm can touch, the peace that passes understanding, the home you never really left. Rest now as what you are. Let everything else come and go. Every breath is an opportunity to return. Every moment of noticing that you've wandered is a moment of waking up. You can't get this wrong. You can only keep practicing. The Zen stories and Buddhist teachings we've explored come from a tradition that has helped people find peace for over 2,000 years. You're not alone in this. Countless others have walked this same path, felt this same restlessness, and found their way through. You are part of a long lineage of seekers who discovered that what they were looking for was never far away. The peace you seek is already here. It lives in the stillness beneath your thoughts, in the awareness that watches everything come and go, in the simple fact of being present for your own life. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with the practice. And know that you can return to this refuge whenever you need to. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.